Or how I will be coming, and I just left all of them, blew away, and now who don't still got it?
They don't want to cross the king. They better not. The turn of these king what? Live in the flesh.
I'll perform this.
King
What's up, baby? They don't want to cross the king. They don't want to cross the Low Life Productions. Return of the Immortals.
They don't want to cross the king.
You better ask them.
If that ass step in the ring,
then I'ma smash them. They talking about guns and things. Boy, if it was a race, I'd fly right past them. They don't want to cross the king. You better ask them.
If that ass step in the ring,
then I'ma smash them.
They talking about guns and things. They don't pass them.
If it was a race, I'd figure.
They don't want to cross the king.
They don't want to try the team. They don't want to be the one. Find in that horror scene. Head chopped off, arms too. Who are you? Shit, they don't really know. But they really know you through. Fuck you and you. Matter of fact, fuck you through.
What? Y'all don't fuck with us.
Bitch, we don't fuck with you.
Out of town, don't come around unless you got a gas.
Boy, Harry Houdini studio. I disappeared that boy. Headshot, red dot, bumper clock, double face, double glock. Boom! Would be glad if I beat you to your pass out. Lay your fucking ass out, you lost to the wrong one. Thought I was a gang banger, now you know I'm your son. The king that brought the team back.
On the blue chariot,
you know you never seen. They don't want to cross the king what?
if that ass step in the ring, then I'ma smash them. They talking about guns and things, then I'ma pass them.
If it was a race,
I'd fly right past them. They don't want to cross the king, you better ask them. If that ass step in the ring, then I'ma smash them. They talking about guns and things, then I'ma pass them. If it was a race, I'd fly right past them.
who are they? Don't nobody really know. Bodies mutilated, so they label them as John Doe. What you try to run for? Sniper rifle, top floor. Everybody know we keep them choppers like the gun show. Head honcho, Latin chase, count me Sancho. Leader of the revolution like I'm El Poncho. Fidel Castro, that's my legendary homie. Told me we need two of you. So I let his people call me Tony. Say they never raided Southern Cali, that's a lie. Here's why, watch them holler tips fly. Bullets falling out the sky. Please don't let the children die. Mama, like that Johnny Gill guy. Everybody head bumping, so I know they feel why. I'ma need more than human beings that never kill. Why I'm still in the field, getting it in for the real. When the race was just one shot, it's one kill.
You better ask them. If that ass step in the ring, then I'ma smash them. They talking about guns and things, then I'ma pass them.
If it was a race, I'd fly right past them. They don't want to cross
You better ask them. If that ass step in the ring, then I'ma smash them. They talking about guns and things, then I'ma pass them.
If it was a race, I'd fly right past them.
I'm coming on so devilish because I got my eyes open to all of this foolishness. Because King B-E-A-S-L-E-Y shining like God. What God? Army rock. 3 nigga, please don't try to rob. Just because you're black, that don't mean you won't die. It's enough with 12 taking our lives, locking us up until we on the grade to die. I apologize if I was flexing so hard. The daddy should have kept up better. Now she with the big dog. Shall I feel no man but God when it come to crossing the king? Martial law, he set up in the city.
They don't want to cross the king, you better ask them. If that ass step in the ring, then I'ma smash them. They talking about guns and things, then I'ma pass them. If it was a race, I'd fly right past them. They don't want to cross the king, you better ask them. If that ass step in the ring, then I'ma smash them.
Revolution, man, I'm telling you, they small. They not ever cross. They don't want to cross the king. Man, when I walked out that booth, them niggas say, damn, man, you still the best. Coach figure, follow me.
Hotel, family. I just had to get the ball rolling with that right there. They Don't Want to Cross the King by core figure King Y. Hey, big bro, shout out to you. That thing jamming, man. That thing is jamming. If you ain't already, make sure y'all go subscribe to Big Bro channel. He gonna keep you up on all the revolutionary news. He gonna let you know what's going on all over the country. Right, he gonna let you know what's going on all over the country. He gonna let you know what's going on all over the world, geopolitical news. And he just gonna keep you up to date. He gonna keep you up to date, man. Show that love and show that support. But let's get right off into this one, though, family. Y'all see the title. Y'all see the title. Y'all know what we're gonna be talking about today. Y'all know what we're going to be talking about today. Let me get that screen share going. Let me get that screen share going so I can pull up this PowerPoint and make sure that the information is coming across exactly how the information is supposed to be coming across. All right, there we go. Y'all see the title. We're going to be talking about the power of hoodoo and conjure. We're going to be talking about slave revolt spells, white converts to hoodoo, and more. Welcome back to Matthew Daniels TV. I am your host, Matthew Daniels, the author of over 16 published works and one of the greatest scribes of our lifetime. Today, we're going to be continuing our in-depth look into African American history during the time period of our enslavement and immediately after. And we're going to be doing it in our own unique way that you cannot find anywhere else on YouTube. We are going to be examining this history from the perspective and words of our ancestors themselves. Brooklyn Zoo, I see you in the chat. Hotel family, thank you for tapping in. So, the power of hoodoo, conjure, slave revolt, spells, white converts to hoodoo, and more. Why? First thing I want to talk about is why is it important that we dig into the history of our ancestors based on the words of our ancestors themselves, and more specifically, dig into the history of hoodoo and conjure. Why is this important? Well, this is important because a lot of our people do not know exactly what our ancestors used to carry them through the darkest times that any group of people have ever endured on this planet. And I'm talking about the horrors that they experienced during the transatlantic slave trade and the horrors that they experienced on those plantations all throughout the United States. Everybody is familiar with how our ancestors used Christianity to sustain themselves. We all understand how our ancestors used the Bible, how some of our ancestors used aspects of Judaism, how our ancestors used aspects of Islam to find spiritual strength and to carry on and to connect themselves with God and with the spiritual realm. But not a lot of us and not enough of us know of the primary religious system, the primary spiritual system that our ancestors used to sustain them on those plantations. And that spiritual system was hoodoo, sometimes called conjure, sometimes called root work. They used hoodoo before Christianity, before Islam, before Judaism, before any of that. Before there was a Nation of Islam, before there was a Moorish Science Temple of America, before there was black churches, before there was an AME church, an African Methodist Episcopal church, before there was an ME church, before there was a colored church, before any of that, there was the hoodoo practitioner. There was the conjure man and the conjure woman. They were the root workers. And these were the individuals who was giving spiritual sustenance to our people to help sustain them on the plantation. And not only that, hoodoo was created by our ancestors on the actual plantation. Yes, hoodoo was created by our ancestors on the plantation. Now, some people may be wondering, how can a spiritual system was utilized as aspects of spiritual traditions that predated it can be created on the plantation when it uses things that predate it? And I'm here to tell you that all religions, all spiritual systems,
all methods in which mankind connects themselves to God, the ancestors, and the spiritual realm utilizes concepts that existed prior to them. Case in point, Islam, right? Islam takes aspects of Christianity, it takes aspects of Judaism, and in the Quran, it even references the Gospels, and it references the Torah and the Tanakh and the prophets of the Old Testament. However, Islam is something new, and it is its own religion and its own spiritual system. Christianity utilizes the same thing. Christianity utilizes aspects of Judaism which predate it, and other spiritual systems, but admittedly Christianity latches on to Judaism. Even the God of Christianity, Jesus, is a Jewish man who followed the Jewish Torah. But irregardless of the aspects of Christianity that predate it in other religions and spiritual systems, we all understand that Christianity has a beginning date, it has a start date, and it's identified and recognized as its own religion and its own spiritual system. Judaism itself, Judaism incorporates things from the Babylonians, it incorporates things from the Persians, it incorporates things from the Egyptians, it incorporates things from the so-called Canaanites that the Bible talks bad about. But even with all of that, even with the aspects of spirituality and religion that are incorporated within the Jewish tradition, the Judaism faith, even with having aspects of spirituality and religious concepts that predate it, we still understand Judaism as having a start date, as being its own spiritual system and its own religion. And even if you, like I say, even if you go to the Persians, even if you go to the Babylonians, even if you go to the Sumerians, even if you go to the Egyptians, no matter how far back you go, and no matter what spiritual system or spiritual tradition or religion you highlight and point out, if you can go back further than that in world history, you will find aspects of that religion, that spiritual tradition that existed prior to it. So even though Hoodoo incorporates aspects of spirituality and religion that predate it, it was created on the slave plantation, and it was created by our ancestors. A lot of times they want to downplay the impact that our ancestors had on world history in one of their most degraded states. Even being subjected to enslavement on a slave plantation, our ancestors did something. They did something that has been done several times in the past and has always been looked upon as something great and something astounding. They created a system based on their environment and based on their hopes, their dreams, their aspirations, their needs, their desires, right? They were able to create a spiritual system and a religion all their own. And that spiritual system and that tradition has been overlooked far too long. And it is actually the religion that carried our ancestors through this most trying time. And so Hoodoo needs to get the respect that I believe it deserves. So let's start this PowerPoint. Let's start this presentation. I got a lot of information for y'all today. I'm going to show y'all some things that I know you've never seen before. I'm going to tell you some things that I know you've never heard before. That's what I like to do. And I'm going to show you a lot of this information from the words of our ancestors themselves. And I'm also going to use other outside sources to corroborate it, because I know people like sources, people like proof. You can't just get up here and talk. Okay, so the first thing we got to ask ourselves is, what is Hoodoo? What is this Hoodoo that I'm talking about? This Hoodoo that I just described to you, what is it? Now, Hoodoo, remember this. Hoodoo is a spiritual tradition created by the enslaved Negroes in the southern portion of the United States. It was used by our ancestors to facilitate their survival and connect them to the spiritual world. When the attempt to steal from them their humanity and their souls and reduce them to mere beasts of burden was made on the slave plantation. And we can look at a quick glance at what Wikipedia has to say. Just to validate some of this, Hoodoo is a set of spiritual practices, traditions, and beliefs that were created by enslaved African Americans in the southern United States. Basically the same definition that I give you guys on the left of your screen. Now look, practitioners of Hoodoo are called root workers, conjure doctors, conjure men or conjure women, and root doctors. Regional synonyms for Hoodoo include root work and conjure. So sometimes when you're looking into the historical record or you're listening to people in the know, they may use terms like conjure man, conjure doctor, root work, conjure woman, root workers, etc., etc. Well, all of these things are terms that allude to the religion or spiritual tradition known as Hoodoo. Scholars define Hoodoo as a folk religion. It is a syncretic religion between two or more cultural religions, in this case being African indigenous spirituality and Abrahamic religions. Remember, I told you, Hoodoo incorporates aspects of things that came before them. Many Hoodoo traditions draw from the beliefs of the Bakongo people of Central Africa. Now, following the Great Migration of African Americans, Hoodoo spread throughout the United States. Basically, what they're trying to tell you is that our ancestors were primarily captured on the west coast of Africa. Okay, our ancestors primarily come from the west and central African regions. Okay, now in these West and Central African regions, you can already assume and imagine that the people there had their own spiritual traditions. They had their own spirituality. They had their own religious beliefs. Now, when they were brought from their homeland to be enslaved in America, one of the things that the colonizers and the enslavers tried to do is they tried to take the humanity out of our ancestors and reduce them to mere beasts of burden. And not only did they try to snatch from them their humanity, they also tried to snatch from them their very souls. They tried to not only suppress their ability to communicate and commune with God and the spirit world, they tried to crush their ability to practice their traditional African religions. And although our ancestors were forced into Christianity on the plantations, and some of them chose Christianity, but although some of our ancestors were forced into Christianity on the plantations, the Christianity of our ancestors on the slave plantation is not the Christianity that exists today. It's not the black church that exists today. That's one of the most common misconceptions that people have. When they look into the historical record, and they see that some of our ancestors on the slave plantations are Christians, they automatically assume that that Christianity is the same Christianity that they have today. That's nonsense. Our ancestors tell us over and over and over again that the only or the main or the primary 95% and over of the sermons that were preached to them came from the verses that says slaves obey your masters, and a servant who knows his master's will and does it not is deserving of many stripes. Those were the two verses that they heard over and over and over again. And the only aspect of Christianity that the vast majority of our ancestors received was the slaves obey your masters. They used that only that aspect of Christianity to further subject our ancestors and take from them their very souls. You have some stories that I've shown on this program. You have some stories where individual slave masters, they wouldn't even allow our ancestors to pray. because they felt like if they're praying, the only thing that they're going to be praying for is freedom. And they were not about to allow them to get free. So if they caught them praying, they would beat them. They would beat them until they were bloody. And if they tried to have meetings, and if they tried to learn the Bible and read the Bible and teach the Bible how the Bible is taught today, they would be beaten. They would be sold off to one of the worst plantations in the South, and sometimes they would be killed. So what our ancestors had to do when they were being subjected spiritually, they had to create for themselves a religious system that could operate within the confines of the plantation. And they had to come up with a spiritual system in a situation where all spirituality was attempted to be taken from them. And so what they did is they took some of their spiritual ideas and practices that they practiced on the continent of Africa, and they implemented them in the new environment that they were in. Because African religion, a lot of it has to do with your involvement with nature. It's your involvement with the trees, the plants, the water. Everything is divine. Everything has a spirit of the divine in it, not just a person. Even the animals, even an animal has a soul and a spirit. And the earth itself is meant to be respected. The waters are meant to be respected. The trees are meant to be respected. Nature itself, human beings are a part of nature. So in the spiritual system of the African in Africa, they would have specific roots, plants, animals that were intimately connected to their practice of spirituality. So when they came to the Americas, and you have different types of plants, different types of roots, different types of trees, different types of animals, because every region isn't the same, they had to adapt to their new environment because their religion is based on nature. So they had to adapt to the new natural environment that they were in. And since they were being punished for practicing their traditional African beliefs, and they were being forced into a form of Christianity that says slaves obey your masters, they had to mask their African spiritual beliefs in this new environment under the guise of Christianity. And sometimes when our ancestors said that they were Christians, you're going to see their underlying practice of Christianity. If a modern day Christian saw it and heard it, they would say that that person was going to hell. And I'm going to show you that. I'm going to show you in this video. Hold on to your seat. I'm going to show you Christian pastors, Negro Christian pastors who were also Hoodoo Conjure practitioners. It was how they knew how to practice out their religion. I'm going to show you these things. So what is Hoodoo? Hoodoo is something that our ancestors created right here on these shores, and it is Hoodoo that carried them through. It is Hoodoo that carried them through. Now, they did use other spiritual traditions, just to be fair, but we want to highlight what they created that helped them to get through, because not enough people know about this, and they don't know how it was used. So the first thing that I want to do, I told you, I like to let the ancestors speak for themselves. I can tell you that Hoodoo was created from what our ancestors brought over on those slave ships from Africa. Wikipedia can tell you that, but we all know Wikipedia has its limits, right? Wikipedia has its limits. So let me ask you a question. If our ancestors who were enslaved on the plantation created Hoodoo, who is the best source for telling us exactly what Hoodoo is and what Hoodoo is not? Think about it. Who's the best source? Exactly. The people who created it. So let's see if our ancestors will tell us that they brought some of these things over from Africa with them. Will they corroborate what Wikipedia says? Will they corroborate what Matthew Daniel says? Yes, they will. Let me get a sip of my coffee. Hold on. Okay. So this comes from the Georgia slave narratives, aka the oral histories of our ancestors. And this comes from Ancestor Rhea's body. Now, her entire slave narrative or oral history is interesting, but I took this piece just to highlight what I'm saying about what hoodoo is. A lot of it came directly from Africa. Okay, so look what the ancestor says. Among the very old slaves, whom he knew as a boy, whom the ancestor knew as a boy, were quite a few, whom the Negroes looked up to, respected, and feared as witches, wizards, and magic workers. These either brought their learning with them from Africa. We rhyme. These Negroes who were respected, looked up to, and feared as witches, wizards, and magic workers, these either brought their learning with them from Africa or absorbed it from their immediate African forebears. So say it with me. Where did a lot of these aspects that are embedded into hoodoo come from? Africa. Mentally, these people weren't brilliant, but highly sensitized, and Rias gave all such as wide a berth as opportunity permitted him, though he knows that they had secret doings and carrying ons. So what he's saying is these people weren't brilliant because they were enslaved. They weren't allowed to get a formal education. But there's a difference between education and intelligence. You can be intelligent and uneducated, and you can be educated and unintelligent. Education is simply the formal learning that you got. You know, you go to school, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade. You're going to school to be educated. You're going to school to learn facts and information, right? That's what education is. But intelligence is your ability to learn, your ability to synthesize information, your ability, watch this, your ability to recognize a pattern. Now, generally speaking, all humans, we are the same species, the human species, right? So our level of intelligence, our ability to learn, and our ability to synthesize information is virtually the same. Now, some people catch on quicker and some people take longer to catch on, which is why we will say some people have a higher IQ, intelligence quotient, I think the word is. But they're talking about the IQ is your intelligence, how quick you catch on. But someone who has a low IQ, they can still assimilate the information that somebody that has a high IQ can, but it may take them longer. If you've ever taken an IQ test, you notice the questions aren't the same type of questions that you get on a school test. The questions are geared to see how fast, that's why they're timed, how fast, boom, you can catch on to what's going on and you can answer the question. And a lot of it is related to pattern recognition. Intelligence is your ability to recognize a pattern, because if you can recognize a pattern, you can predict the future. Our ancestors, right? Our ancestors reached the level of intelligence where you can realize a pattern that, okay, the sun comes up, the sun goes down. The sun comes up, the sun goes down. The sun comes up, the sun goes down. After this happens, a certain amount of times, the seasons begin to change. After the sun comes up and go down, X amount of days, it begins to get cold. Things start dying on the trees. And then after the sun comes up and goes down another X amount of days, things begin to get back hot again. It starts to get warm, right? And then the green foliage comes back. So it is your ability to recognize the pattern of the sun coming up and going down at a regular pace, and that after it does this a certain amount of times, things happen on the earth, you get the seasons. That ability to recognize a pattern gives you a predictive power, and your predictive power gives you the ability to manipulate the world around you and build society, build agriculture. Even if you're trying to hunt animals, you have to be able to catch a pattern. How does this animal act? When this happens, what do the animal do? What does the animal eat? This time of year, where does the animal go? It's your ability to understand the pattern. That's the basis of intelligence. So even though our ancestors weren't educated, they were intelligent, and they were intelligent enough to create a spiritual system of their own in the situation that they were in on those plantations. And you see how the ancestor says that they had secret doings and carrying on. That's why a lot of people today don't understand just how much hoodoo was influential in carrying us through on the slave plantation, because a lot of those practices were done in secret, and it was easy for it to be covered up. And I'm going to show you some of this. There was a systematic effort. There was a systematic push to suppress and keep our ancestors from practicing hoodoo and to force them into another spiritual tradition. Why? Because even with hoodoo, it still gave them some type of cultural link, some type of memory, genetic memory of who they were and where they came from. And that in and of itself is culture, and culture gives you power, and culture unifies an individual. But if they can force you to take on someone else's culture, it gives the culture of the person that you're taking on, it gives them the power, because now you have to be like them. The ancestor says, in truth, had the southern whites not curbed the mumbo jumboisms of his people, and that's just disrespectful. The mumbo jumboism that's the hoodoo. They gonna be disrespectful, but it's okay. In truth, had the southern whites not curbed the mumbo jumboism of his people, he is of the opinion that it would not now be safe to step out his door at night. Hoodoo was powerful. And hoodoo was all over the South. Now, did you have some people faking hoodoo? Yes. Did you have some fake conjurers? Yes. But did you have some real ones? Yes. Yes, you had some real ones. And not only did it take over in the South, when they had what you call the Great Migration after slavery ended, and a lot of our ancestors left the South and moved up north and moved to other parts of the United States, they took hoodoo with them. And it spread. Hoodoo spread. And you even had, they don't want to talk about this, but you even had white people who converted to the religion of hoodoo. I'm going to show you guys some of that as well as we go further. So, what was hoodoo used for? How did they use it? And how can we prove it? Hoodoo was used to protect our ancestors from their enemies, inflict harm on their enemies, heal them from sickness and disease, assist them in gaining their freedom, and to protect them and give them strength during their many uprisings, revolts, rebellions, and battles for freedom. Growing up, I always heard how our ancestors used the Bible. Nat Turner used the Bible. Harriet Tubman likened herself to Moses. She used the Bible. Denmark Vesey was a pastor. He used the Bible. And the Bible was the primary religious tool used to empower our ancestors to revolt and to try to escape, right? And to try to flee to the north and to fight back and to have uprisings. But did you know that many of those uprising, revolts, rebellions, and those escapes on the Underground Railroad was really the cause of hoodoo and conjure? They don't want to tell you that during a lot of these revolts and during a lot of those rebellions and during a lot of those uprisings, there was always a conjure man in the crowd. And a lot of times, most times, before they actually went on their mission to fight back, the conjure man would create potions that sometimes they would drink to make them invincible, or to give them strength, or to give them the courage to see it through. Or they would create power from things like graveyard dirt. And we're going to explain graveyard dirt in a moment, but they would use powders made from graveyard dirt and roots and herbs, and they would apply it to their body. They would apply it to their body to help them when they actually fought. It was not, and I'm not taking nothing away from the Bible. I'm highlighting hoodoo. Okay, I'm highlighting hoodoo in a lot of these revolts, and I'm about to show you. Y'all know how I do. I show you exactly what I'm saying. But a lot of these uprisings, revolts, and rebellions, they happen because of hoodoo. It was hoodoo behind it. And those ancestors that was fighting and dying and bleeding on the battlefield, they were hoodoo practitioners, and they were backed not by a Catholic priest. They were backed by the hoodoo conjure man and the hoodoo conjure woman. Even when they would try to escape on the Underground Railroad, you know what they would do? They would go to the conjure man or the conjure woman. They would get powders made. They would get potions made, and they would put the graveyard dirt mixed with the herbs. They would put it on their feet to guide their feet to the north. And they would put the powder and the concoctions. They would rub it on their body to confound the bloodhounds, because you know how they would sit the hounds on our ancestors when they would run. So before they would run away, they would go to see the hoodoo doctor, and the hoodoo doctor would give them something to put it on their body to help them escape. And we have now, yes, some of our ancestors got caught, and they'll want to say, that's how you know, that's how you know that the hoodoo was fake. But how many of our ancestors got free? How many of our ancestors were successful? How many of our ancestors actually were successful using this? I'm going to show you guys. Look, check this out. In Alabama slave narratives, what I keep bringing to y'all, the oral histories, it was documented that former slaves used graveyard dirt to escape from slavery on the Underground Railroad. Now, the slave narratives, the oral histories, those are the records from the people who were enslaved themselves. They tell you this themselves. That's how you know it's primary information. Freedom seekers rubbed graveyard dirt on the bottom of their feet, or put graveyard dirt in their tracks to prevent slave-catching dogs from tracking their scent. Former slave Rudy Tart from Alabama said there was a conjurer who would hoodoo the dogs. An enslaved conjurer could conjure confusion in the slave catcher's dogs, which prevented whites from catching runaway slaves. So when we talk about the Underground Railroad, we can't talk about the Underground Railroad without talking about hoodoo. In other narratives, slaves made a jackball to know if a slave would be whipped or not. Slaves chewed and spit juices of roots near their enslavers secretly to calm the emotions of the slaveholders, which prevented whippings. Slaves relied on conjurers to prevent whippings and being sold further south. So we always hear about how our ancestors were, yes, they were beaten. Yes, they were tied to trees. Yes, they were tied to posts. Yes, they were whipped. And a lot of times they were whipped until they bled. So in order to prevent some of these whippings, our ancestors, they would go to the conjure man or the conjure woman. Now, you have some people who would try to say that's nonsense, that's superstition, that can't help you. Conjure is a waste of time. That's not going to help you from getting whipped, yada, 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 yada. But those same people would tell you when you're in a trying situation to pray. They'll tell you to pray. Or they'll tell you to go to a pastor, or they'll tell you to go to a priest, or they'll tell you to go to an imam and have that person lay hands on you and pray over you. And we have been conditioned in our minds. We have been conditioned in our minds to accept that if these individuals who are authorities in the church pray for us and lay hands on us, it can affect our physical reality. But at the same time, your ancestor spirituality that says you could go to the conjure man or the conjure woman for the same type of results, they say that's nonsense. They say that's foolishness. They say that's superstition. Well, if being conjured to prevent whippings is superstitious, getting hands laid on you and praying to prevent whippings, that's superstitious as well. Look, matter of fact, that's all I'm gonna read from now. I'm not gonna read the whole thing. You get the point. You get the point. So that's what some of the things that our ancestors actually used hoodoo for. They used it to connect themselves to the spirit realm. They used it to help themselves escape from slavery. They used it to prevent themselves from being whipped. They used it as a way to get to seek revenge on the slave masters and on the evil overseers. And they used it to help them in the uprisings, the revolts, the rebellions, and their battles for freedom. So in all of that, Hoodoo was right there, and hoodoo was the primary thing that carried us over. Now, to prove what I'm talking about, because I know some people, they're not going to want to believe it. They're not going to want to believe it. So let's actually look at some slave revolts. How about that? Oh, hold on. Alpha Plus say amazing topics. Hey, appreciate that. Appreciate that. Thanks for tapping in. Thanks for tapping in, brother. I appreciate that. So look, now check this out. Have y'all ever heard of the New York slave revolt of 1712? Now, I told you our ancestors brought this stuff directly from Africa with them. And so from the earliest times on the plantation, our ancestors was using hoodoo to survive and to carry themselves through. That's the primary spiritual system. So have you ever heard of the New York slave revolt of 1712? Look, the New York slave revolt of 1712 was an uprising in New York City in the province of New York of 23 black slaves. They killed 9 whites and injured another 6 before they were stopped. More than 70 black people were arrested in jail. Of these, 27 were put on trial and 21 convicted and executed. Colonial forces, and this is the aftermath for the revolt. Colonial forces arrested 70 blacks and jailed them. 6 are reported to have committed suicide. 27 were put on trial, 21 of whom were convicted and sentenced to death, including 1 woman with child. 20 were burned to death, and 1 was executed on a breaking wheel. After the revolt, the city and colony passed more restrictive laws governing black and Indian slaves. Slaves were not permitted to gather in groups of more than 3. They were not permitted to carry firearms, and gambling was outlawed. Crimes of property damage, rape, and conspiracy to kill qualified for the death penalty. Now, check this out. Man, much love, family. Thank you. Now, I want y'all to pay attention to something. 1712 is prior to the formation of America. Remember, Independence Day, and let's do some history. Independence Day is July the 4th, 1776. Now, prior to America becoming America, this area was the 13 colonies. And these 13 colonies were subjected to various European powers from across the seas. So what I'm going to show you guys is that even before America was America, even during the time of the 13 colonies, even during the colonial period, we're going to see hoodoo on the ground helping our ancestors, right? Now, the New York slave revolt of 1712, when you pull this stuff up, you're going to read about how our ancestors murdered several white people in rebellion for how they treated them. But how many of you knew? How many of you knew that hoodoo played a role in the New York slave revolt of 1712? Let me prove it to you. Check this out. Check this out. Now, you can actually find it's some documents related to the Court of General Sessions. It's a minute book, and it covers the years from 1694 to 1731. So it covers the time period of the New York slave revolt of 1712. Now, in these public records, you find documented evidence of these Negro slaves who were being tried for murder. They actually held court proceedings, and I'm glad that they did, because now we have the records. They actually held court proceedings that documents the Negroes that were part of the revolt that were tried for murder of those particular white people. Now, if you look at the highlighted portion, you can probably see it, but I'm just going to zoom in on it a little bit. Look, it says this is what the courts is talking about. These are the minutes. for Negro slaves for ya. Murder of, and it gives a name, Adrian Highland. Then it's another one. For, what are they talking about? This entry is for Negro slaves for ya. Murder of, and they give another name. And what it keeps talking about is Negro slaves for ye, the murder of the individual white people that were murdered. Now check this out. I want y'all to look at this last one real quick. I'm gonna tie it all together. The last one is highlighted. Negro slaves for ye. Murder of Jewish, and you can't really, it's hard to read cursive. Marshallet. We're gonna get a better rendering of this in a second. But y'all see that. Negro slaves for ye. Murder of George Marshallet. So one of the white men that were murdered is labeled right here, and they're saying that he was murdered by Negro slaves in this particular slave revolt. Now, this is, and I got the source on the bottom of the individual who did the study and went through these documents, and he put all of this information about this slave revolt and the trial of the slaves that were involved. He put all of this information online, so you can look at that link that I got on the bottom. You can put that in. It's going to take you exactly to what I'm showing you guys on the screen. But what he did is he put together a chart that gives you, they name all of the slaves that were tried for participating in the slave revolt of 1712. They give you the race of the slave. Now, why do they do that? Because some of the slaves were Indians. Okay. You see here at the bottom where it says Ambrose, Indian, man. Hosea, Indian, man. And you have Tom, Indian, man. So there were some Indians who participated in this slave revolt as well, because there were Indians enslaved right alongside our ancestors. Now, that's kind of a stray that's hitting the Albo community, because they want us to believe that all of the Negroes were Indians. But even back in 1712, they had a clear distinction on who was a Negro and who was an Indian. But I digress. So if you look at the top, I got it highlighted. The top of the chart, it tells you slave, race, sex, victim is the white person that was killed, that they're on trial for killing, master, and their sentence. So the master is the person that owned the slave that's being tried. Now, I gave you guys a zoomed in picture of the bottom portion of that chart here on the right. And you see where it says Peter the doctor, a Negro man. The white man that he is accused of killing is George Mayer Shalet. That's the one I showed you on the last page. And where it says none given, that's the column for master. So this is a free Negro man, Peter the doctor. And where it says not tried, that's his sentence. So he was arrested as part of the slaves that participated in the revolt. But for some reason, this free Negro was not tried. Now you can see some of them were found guilty, some of them were found not guilty, and some of them were not tried. Now, who is Peter the doctor? Let's look into it, family. This is going to blow your mind. Remember, we're talking about the New York slave revolt of 1712. This is in the colonial period. Now let's look at the role that Hoodoo played in that slave revolt of the colonial period. Now look, the leader, now this is what they're saying with modern day historian scholarship. The leader of the revolt was a free African conjurer named Peter the doctor. I just showed you. Who made, what did he make? A magical powder for the slaves to be rubbed on the body and clothes for their protection and empowerment. The Africans that revolted were Akan people from Ghana. Historians suggest the powder made by Peter the doctor probably included some cemetery dirt to conjure the ancestors to provide spiritual militaristic support from ancestral spirits as help during the slave revolt. The Bakongo people in Central Africa incorporated cemetery dirt into Minkisi conjure bags to activate it with ancestral spirits. And during the slave trade, Bakongo people were brought to colonial New York. The New York slave revolt of 1712 and others in the United States, watch this, showed a blending of West and Central African spiritual practices among enslaved and free black people. Hoodoo, ladies and gentlemen. So the leader of the revolt was a conjurer, Peter the Doctor. So Hoodoo led one of the very first revolts that even happened over here. And what did he do? He made a magic powder that he rubbed on the body and the clothes of the slaves for their protection and empowerment. And he used cemetery dirt to do it. Now, I had a conversation with some of my friends, and we were talking about cemetery dirt, and they were laughing at me. They laughed at me for saying it. But I understood that they only laughed because they didn't understand the spiritual science behind it. See, our ancestors respected and revered their ancestors. And they knew, matter of fact, I'm gonna say it to you like this. Check this out. The only people who know what happens after you die are the people that have died. I'm gonna say it again. The only people who knows 100% what happens to you after you die is the people that have died. You get it? They've died. The only people that know how to fly a plane is the ones that got up, that know how it feels to fly a plane, are the ones that have actually flew a plane. You don't know what it feels like to swim in the middle of the ocean until you swim in the middle of the ocean. That the experience gives you that first-hand knowledge and information. So our ancestors understood this concept. So in order for them to connect with the spirit realm, with the spirit world, with the underworld, with the realm of the gods and the angels, whatever you want to call it, in order to connect with that realm. Now you don't know 100% what's in that realm, but you do know grandma and grandpa. You know mom and dad. You know them. You have a direct connection with them. You have an emotional, a spiritual connection with them. You know them. You know them. So when you want to connect with the spirit realm, what do? You connect with your ancestor who you have a connection with. You connect with them in the spirit world. And then they are kind of like guides. They will help you as you traverse these matters of spirituality. If you need things moved in the spirit realm that will help you in the physical realm, you connect with that which you know that's in the spiritual realm, because they know what needs to be done, if anything can be done in the spirit realm to help you. So our ancestors would use the graveyard dirt, the cemetery dirt, because it was a link to the ancestors that are buried in the cemetery. And that physical link is something that would help guide the mind. When you focus on that physical cemetery dirt, it's helping to guide the mind and the emotions and the spiritual energy to that which the cemetery dirt represents. And our ancestors would make the powder out of it. They would put it on the individual body to protect them and empower them, give them spiritual power and protection. Okay. Now, an individual will say, "Oh, that's superstition. That's crazy. The graveyard dirt will do nothing for you. Why would you go to a conjure man before a revolt?" They would say that. But if an individual was about to embark on something like that and they said a prayer, or they put on a necklace with a cross, right? Or they took their beads, their rosary beads, and put their rosary beads in their pocket, or they took a little image of a Catholic saint and they put that inside of their pocket, and they felt like their prayer would help them in this coming military battle, you would see nothing wrong with that, because we have been brainwashed to not see anything wrong with that. Or if an individual went to a pastor or went to a priest and was like, man, you know, I just got drafted, I'm going to war. Can you please say a prayer of protection on me as I go to this war in Iraq, as I go in this war in Vietnam, as I go to this war wherever the Americans finna send me to war with? Can you please say a prayer of protection on me so that I come back to my family unharmed? The average mind will see nothing wrong with that, because they have been conditioned to see power in prayer. They have been conditioned to see power in the priest, the pastor, the imam, the preacher, the deacon, the usher. They have been trained to see power in that, and in relics of the Bible, the cross, rosary beads, saints, candles with Saint Mary on it. They have been taught to see power in that. But when an individual says, oh, Peter the doctor was a conjure man, and before the slave revolt of 1712, they went to the conjure man, that's hocus pocus, mumbo jumbo, blah, blah, blah. That meant nothing at all. No. We have to reprogram our minds, because I'm showing you in one of the earliest slave revolts, our ancestors went to the conjure man. Now check this out. Modern day historians are saying that Peter the doctor was the leader of the revolt. But look, don't let this go over your head. Look, Peter the doctor, Negro man, a free Negro. We don't even know how he got free, but he was free in the fight for his people. But even though historians are saying he was the leader of the revolt, and he was arrested for the revolt, and his name was thrown in the hat, he wasn't even tried. He wasn't even tried. Now, I can't say with 100% certainty that has something to do with his spiritual capabilities, but I can say that the facts on the ground are the leader of the revolt was a conjure man. The leader of the revolt made magical powers for people to put on their bodies. The leader of the revolt was a free Negro, and the leader of the revolt wasn't even tried. He wasn't even tried. Now, had that been anything else, they would call that divine intervention for that man. They would call that divine intervention. But since it's our ancestor, and since we're talking about hoodoo, it's going to take a lot for me to break down those mental walls so you can see that this was divine intervention for Peter the doctor in the slave revolt of 1712. But let's keep going, because that's not the only slave revolt where hoodoo played a major role. How many of you, hold on, we got another comment in the chat. All what you're reading is straight facts. People have used it to our benefit to this very day. Exactly, family, exactly. Now look, check this out. I'm gonna show you how hoodoo has been hidden from you. It's been hidden. Check this out. How many people have heard the name Denmark Vesey? Now, I know a lot of you guys that watch my channel, y'all smart, y'all intelligent, y'all educated, y'all know what's going on. Y'all know who Denmark Vesey is. But for those who don't know who Denmark Vesey is, and yes, that's Denmark Vesey with his own statue. For those of you who don't know who Denmark Vesey is, Denmark Vesey, born 1767, probably in St. Thomas, the Danish West Indies, died July 2nd, 1822 in Charleston, South Carolina. Now, he was a self-educated black man who did what? He planned the most extensive slave rebellion in United States history. Now, Denmark Vesey, he was also a member of the clergy. He was a pastor, I believe. I know he was high up in the church, and I do believe he was a pastor. Even in that statue, I think that's him holding the Bible right there. But Denmark Vesey is known for planning the most extensive slave rebellion in the United States history. And while I've had several conversations with individuals back and forth about our ancestors during slavery, and a lot of times they bring up Denmark Vesey and his connection to the Bible and his connection to the church in an attempt to describe how much the black church and how much Christianity and how much the Bible assisted our people during slavery. But I got a surprise for you. In the Denmark Vesey planned slave rebellion. Hold on to your britches. Check this out. In 1800, Denmark was allowed to purchase his freedom with $600 he had won in a street lottery. He was already familiar with the Great Haitian Slave Revolt of the 1790s, and while working as a carpenter, he read anti-slavery literature. Dissatisfied with his second-class status as a freedman and determined to help relieve the far more oppressive conditions of bondsmen he knew, Vesey planned and organized an uprising of city and plantation blacks. The plan reportedly called for the rebels to attack guardhouses and arsenals, seize their arms, kill all whites, burn and destroy the city, and free the enslaved people. As many as 9,000 blacks may have been involved, though some scholars dispute this figure. Warned by a house servant, white authorities on the eve of the scheduled outbreak made massive military preparations which forestalled the insurrection. During the ensuing 2 months, some 130 blacks were arrested. In the trials that followed, 67 were convicted of trying to raise an insurrection. Of these, 35, including Vesey, were hanged, and 32 were condemned to exile. In addition, 4 white men were fined and imprisoned for encouraging the plot. Let me get a drink of my water. Okay. So they say that upwards of 9,000 blacks may have been involved in this plot. And had he not been snitched on by a black house servant to the white authorities, our enslavement in America might have ended right here. Because a big problem, a big hindrance was our ability to organize in large numbers and organize a large enough attack, right? A large enough united front. And so if these 9,000 blacks and they had white help had been successful and they weren't snitched on, our enslavement may have ended right here with Denmark Vesey. And that's just real, man. That's real talk. But we all know Denmark Vesey. But have you ever heard of Gullah Jack? Huh? Have you ever heard of Gullah Jack? Well, today you will. Gullah Jack died July 12, 1812. He was killed. He was part of Denmark Vesey's plot. Also known as Quarter Jack and sometimes referred to as Gullah, Jack Pritchard look at what he was. He was an African Methodist and Hoodoo conjurer who Paul Pritchard enslaved in Charleston, South Carolina. The first thing that I want you guys to take away from that is that he was an African Methodist and a Hoodoo conjurer. I'm going to show you guys that every Christian wasn't a Christian like you are Christian today. Several people inside of those black churches, even some of the pastors themselves, they practiced hoodoo and they were conjurers. They just had that label of Christian because that was allowed. You couldn't openly be the hoodoo conjurer, but you could openly be an African Methodist. And so Gullah Jack was an African Methodist and a hoodoo conjurer, showing you that everybody that you think was a Christian was not a Christian. Check this out. Gullah Jack is known for his role as a co-conspirator along with Denmark Vesey in planning the rebellion that will become known as Denmark Vesey slave conspiracy in 1822. Both Vesey and Gullah Jack were involved in some capacity with the AME Church in Charleston, African Methodist Episcopal Church. It was at the AME Church that Vesey recruited Gullah Jack for his planned uprising in Charleston. Wait a minute. Why would a Christian recruit a hoodoo conjurer? Did he know that he was a hoodoo conjurer? Yes, he did. Now watch this. Using his Africa-based influences, Gullah Jack was crucial in recruiting African-born enslaved people as soldiers and provided them with charms and protection against the Bukra, the whites. He is also said to have used his spiritual powers to terrify others into keeping silent about the conspiracy. Historians believe Jack's strong African culture, contrasted against Vesey's preaching, helped attract many of the enslaved people that joined the revolt. Gullah Jack was one of the most instrumental people in what we know as the Vesey conspiracy of 1822. Okay? And he was a hoodoo conjurer who he actually learned this stuff in Africa. And you see, he played the same role as Peter the Doctor in the New York slave revolt. Check this out, family. This is a book I have. It's called Power Concedes Nothing Without a Demand. Now, in this book, I actually have excerpts from the trial transcripts of individuals that was arrested and tried for the Denmark Vesey slave conspiracy of 1822. And I actually have some of the records that talk about Gullah Jack. So we don't have to just use Wikipedia. I'm always going to go deeper than Wikipedia. Remember that. Now look what they have to say about Gullah Jack. And we're going to ask ourselves the question: what role did hoodoo play in the most extensive slave rebellion plot in the United States history? We do not give enough credit to hoodoo in our understanding of history. Look what they say about Gullah Jack in the trial transcripts. Among the vast number of cases disposed of by the first court, and they're talking about the vast number of cases of individuals that were arrested for the Vesey plot. Hold on, let me get a drink of my coffee. Give me a second, family. Y'all all right? We're going to be here for a while. Got a lot to show y'all. Look, among the vast number of cases disposed of by the first court in a session of nearly 6 weeks involving the most intense and unremitting labor, it would be impossible to overlook the case of Jack Pritchard, otherwise called Gullah Jack. Now they say out of all the cases that they've done, that they've covered, it would be impossible to overlook the case of Jack Pritchard, otherwise called Gullah Jack. Why would it be impossible? Because he was so instrumental to the revolt or the conspiracy. Look, the testimony in the appendix of more than one of the witnesses will establish fully his guilt and prove the justice of the sentence by which he was ushered into another world. But no description can accurately convey to others the impression which his trial, defense, and appearance made on those who witnessed the workings of his cunning and rude address. Born a conjurer and a physician in his own country, for in Angola they are matters of inheritance, he practiced these arts in his country for 15 years without its being generally known among the whites. So what they're saying is Gullah Jack was he was born in Angola, okay? And he had been practicing these arts that we are now calling hoodoo because they got mixed with Christianity here on these shores. Remember, he became a member of the African Methodist Church, okay, Episcopal Church, but he was born in Angola. And he say that in Angola, he was born a conjurer and a physician. Remember, Peter the doctor was a conjurer. And here you have Gullah Jack being a conjurer and a physician, because Hoodoo also was centered around healing an individual. They were the doctors, the medicine doctors. Make the connection. And they say that in Angola, these are matters of inheritance. You could be born into the craft. The same way an individual can tell you that you could be born into like the priesthood. In ancient Egypt, the high priest would often leave the seat of the high priest to his son. And the office of the priest, a lot of times it was like a family business. Now, yes, they brought in other people and taught them the craft, but the son of the priest became a priest. Even in the Bible, when they talk about the Levites, the Levitical priesthood was a bloodline. You were born into the tribe of Levi, so you were born into the tribe that were the priest. Now, this concept is not an Egyptian concept. It's not a Jewish concept. It's a concept that many cultures held over many different centuries in many different parts of the world. So even in Africa, one could be born into the quote unquote priesthood. The conjurer, the real conjurer, the root worker, the conjure doctor, the real Hoodoo practitioner, they are like the priests, the pastors, the imams of the religion of Hoodoo. So one could be born into it, okay? And one could be raised up and taught the arts, which Gullah Jack was. And he practiced it for 15 years in his own country of Angola before he was enslaved. Look, they say Vesey, Denmark Vesey, who left no engines of power unessayed, seems in an early stage of his design to have turned his eye on this necromancer. What is a necromancer? Someone who communicates with the dead. Okay? Now, they make a necromancer seem like it's something bad and evil, only because our ancestors' power came from the communication with their ancestors in the spirit realm. That's how you connect to the spirit realm. That's how you maneuver through the spirit realm, through your ancestors who have already gone there. So it was a trick to get us to stop trying to connect with our ancestors in the spirit realm, because that's where we drew our spiritual power from. And we were taught that any type of communication with the spirit realm is evil and is wicked, unless you're doing it how another culture told you to. So instead of going to your ancestors, you're going to someone else's ancestors, and who knows where they will guide you in the spirit realm. They're just going to guide you to forever be subjected to their descendants. They're not really going to help you over helping their own descendants, but your ancestors will help you. So a necromancer is someone who speaks to the dead. So anyone who speaks to their deceased ancestors is a necromancer. This is what they're saying. So Vesey, early on, he connected with Gullah Jack. So Gullah Jack was there from the beginning. Now look, they say that he turned his eye on this necromancer, aware of his influence with his own countrymen, who are distinguished both for their credulous superstition and clannish sympathies, their tribalism. And what they're calling superstition is just a disrespectful way to talk about their religion and their superstition, right? Because if a conjurer can't heal somebody with conjurer, a preacher can't heal you laying his hands on you. I'm sorry, man. It does not appear that Jack required much persuasion to induce him to join in a project which afforded him the most ample opportunities of displaying his peculiar art. So he was willing, because of his hate for enslavement and his hate for the white man who enslaved him, he was more than willing to join Denmark Vesey in plotting out one of the most extensive conspiracies of in United States history. Okay, Hoodoo was a major force. Right now, look, they say, I'm not gonna read all that. Yeah, look, they say such was their belief in his invulnerability that his charms and amulets were in request, and he was regarded as a man who could only be harmed but by the treachery of his fellows. So Gullah Jack was an individual who created charms and amulets to help the individuals in this upcoming slave revolt. And even the people around him, they believed him to be invincible. And they believed that his charms and things would render them invincible as well. And they were of the belief that Gullah Jack could only be harmed by the treachery of his fellows. A lot of times the invulnerability was to make it so where no white man could harm them, because the white man was the enemy. He was the slave master. And I find it interesting to note that they were able to move about for years planning this thing, where they even had white people on board. He had, some sources say, up to 9,000 blacks on board that were a part of this conspiracy, and it was only taken down because a black house Negro snitched on them. And so even with the understanding that Gullah Jack could not be harmed but only by the treachery of his fellows, it was the treachery of his fellows that took him down and that took the conspiracy down. Now, that's not proof that his hoodoo worked, but it's interesting, and it's a it's a fact of history. It's a fact of history. Okay, so even with the New York slave revolt of 1712, hoodoo played a major role, and with Denmark Vesey slave revolt, hoodoo played a major role. Hoodoo led both the revolt and the conspiracy. Although the second one, and obviously they didn't lead it on their own, but hoodoo played a major role. I'm going to skip over this, the autobiography of Bishop M.F. Jameson. I might come back to it later. Yeah, this is what I want to get to. Now, I keep telling you guys, Lauren Mathis, hey, brother, keep teaching the truth. Hey, appreciate that. No doubt. Hey, man, we have to understand it for what it is. Our ancestors' ancestral practices have been there from the beginning. They've been there from the beginning. They was helping our ancestors escape. They were helping protect them on the slave plantations. They were helping them in the slave revolts. The hoodoo was right there. Hoodoo was right there. Now, I keep telling y'all that the Christianity of our ancestors is not the Christianity of today. I keep telling y'all that. And I just showed y'all Gullah Jack. He was a Christian member of the African Methodist Church, but he was also a hoodoo conjurer. He was born into it in Africa, in Angola. So now what I'm going to show y'all is I'm going to show y'all a preacher. Now, this is a Christian preacher. A Christian preacher who was also indulging in the art of hoodoo and conjure. Remember what I told you guys in the beginning. What is hoodoo? Hoodoo is a mixture between African spirituality and these Abrahamic faiths. Our ancestors had to utilize what they could on the slave plantations to work out their spirituality. So sometimes calling themselves Christian, they weren't a Christian like you. They were calling themselves Christian because they had to, or like protection. Hey, I'm a Christian. I'm a member of the church too. But even in their practices and their beliefs, A lot of it didn't even come from the Bible, because the only verses that they were taught was slaves obey your masters. So check this out. I'm gonna break this down for you. Look, the headline says, Negro preacher shot on treasure hunt under house. Now, they say it's a treasure hunt, but I'm going to show you it's hoodoo. Look what the article says. And this is somewhere in Rennet, Milligan. Somewhere in Houston, I'm sorry. Houston, this was Rennet, Milligan, the name. Negro preacher, he's a preacher, Christian preacher, was in a hospital today with a hip wound suffered, he said. Let me read it over. Rennet, Milligan, Negro preacher was in a hospital today with a hip wound suffered, he said, when he crawled beneath the house seeking buried treasure. So he's been shot in the hip, he's in the hospital, and he's saying, I crawled under the house looking for buried treasure. Watch this. Neighbors said the shot was fired by the occupant of the house, who had feared a conjure was going to be put upon it. So the occupant of the house, the person that lived at the house, shot the Negro preacher because they feared a conjure was going to be put upon the house. Now look, Milligan said he knew nothing of any conjure and added he was employed to hunt treasure beneath the house by the owner who had dreamed it was there. Now, let's take a look at this. If the owner really told him that he dreamed that he had treasure under his house, and he asked the preacher to dig under his house to look for the treasure, why did the occupant of the house shoot him in the hip? The occupant of the house should have known that he was employed to look for treasure under the house. Correct? And why would he be digging for the treasure without the owner of the house? If you thought it was some buried treasure under your house, and even why wouldn't you dig it up yourself? Why go to the preacher to dig it up? First question. Why not just dig it up yourself? And even if you do go to the preacher and tell him, come look for this treasure, why wouldn't you be there with him digging it up to make sure he don't find it and steal it? None of this makes any sense. And if you were going to have the preacher come dig up the treasure while you weren't there, why wouldn't you tell the person that's living in the house with you, hey, preacher Milligan, Pastor Milligan is coming to dig under the house? Why? His story doesn't make sense. But why would the occupant of the house fear that a conjure was going on? Look, when they're talking about conjure, some of the practices of conjure, look, to cast a spell, the conjure bag, bottle, or box must be left on the premises of the person sought. Whichever one of the instruments is used may be left under the steps of the house, on the mantelpiece, in the dining room, or about the barnyard. Whenever somebody was trying to put a bad hoodoo or a bad conjure on somebody, they would have to first create the conjure bag. Now, a conjure bag is a minkisi. It's something that they did in Africa too. They would get some type of cloth. Sometimes it was like red flannel cloth. Sometimes it was a regular napkin, but they would get some kind of cloth and they would put the ingredients of the conjure in it. Okay. Sometimes it would be certain roots, certain herbs. Sometimes it would be graveyard dirt. Sometimes it would be some certain powder that they created. Sometimes it would be a personal possession of the person that you want to put the bad conjure on. It may be some of their hair. It may be a fingernail. It may be a personal item of that person. And so you put these things into the conjure bag or the minkisi bag. You tie it up. You put the spell on the item. So the item itself is what will put the conjure or the bad hoodoo or the bad energy on the individual. But then you have to place the conjure bag, the minkisi, you have to put it in close proximity to the person that you want to hoodoo. And a lot of times our ancestors, they will put it on the house of the individual that they was going to hoodoo, right? Or if they could gain access into the house, they will put it somewhere inside of the house or somewhere that this person frequented often. But the thing about it is sometimes they would leave the conjure bag or the minkisi, they would leave it in close proximity to the person that they would want to hoodoo or conjure, but the conjure might fall on not the intended target, but the family member of the intended target, or the business of the intended target, or the animals that the intended target own, right? Look what it goes on to say. It is a matter of preference what the doctor, the hoodoo doctor, it is a matter of preference with the doctor as to whether he uses the bag, the bottle, or the box. The person caught, the person who gets the bad conjure, that gets the bad energy or the curse, the person that the curse is applied to is not always the one sought. The spell may fall on some member of his family, on some of his livestock, on his house, and cause it to burn, or on his lands and cause them not to bring forth crops. So when you have this preacher crawling under somebody's house, the occupant shot him, and they said that they feared that they was being conjured because that's how they applied the conjure. So this pastor was, listen to me good, was not looking for buried treasure. For whatever reason, the person that person in that house did something to him that he did not like, and he wanted to conjure him. And he was crawling under the house to place his conjure bag, bottle, or box, whatever item he had. He got caught, and somebody, boom, they shot him in the hip. But he couldn't admit to trying to conjure them. So even Christian preachers quite often practice hoodoo. So we have a Christian preacher right here practicing hoodoo, and he got shot. We have Denmark Vesey, a Christian, a member of the AME church. When he planned out his biggest slave revolt, who did he go to? He went to Gullah Jack. He went to Gullah Jack, who was born a conjurer, right? He didn't just lean on the Bible for whatever that's worth. So the Christianity of our ancestors may not always be the Christianity that you think. Now look, check this out. To further drive this point home, I'm about to show you another I'm about to show you evidence of another Christian preacher practicing hoodoo. Now, on the surface, this is a pastor. This is a pastor. When you dig a little deeper, he's using the religion that our ancestors created. He's not using the religion that was created 2,000 years ago. But when they see Reverend, they're automatically gonna, they're gonna give all credit to any spiritual system that our ancestors had. They're gonna give it to Christianity. But I'm going to change that because I'm going to start teaching more. Now look, check this out. The article says, great excitement. 2 Negroes arrested, supposed to be the murderers of Corred LaCour. Wednesday night, 2 Negro men, George Walker and the Reverend Albert Hadnot, were arrested and lodged in jail, charged with having murdered young L.C. LaCour, whose mysterious disappearance was reported in our last issue. So some man went missing. They figured he disappeared. They didn't know what happened. Later on, 2 Negro men get arrested, charged with his murder. One of them happened to be a reverend, the Christian pastor. Let's see how this play out. The town is in such a state of excitement that it is impossible to arrive at the particulars. But this much we have learned. George Walker confesses that he saw LaCour, the murdered man, ride up to the house where the other Negro, the Reverend Hadnot, was staying. So LaCour, the murdered man, go to the Reverend's house. That LaCour hollowed hollered when Hadnot got up and went out to where LaCour was. So LaCour goes to the Reverend's house. We don't know why just yet. He yells, he makes some kind of noise. Hadnot, the Reverend, gets up, goes outside to where LaCour is. That then and there, LaCour, was killed and the body taken to the bayou nearby and thrown into it. That blood on planks near the house of Hadnot is plainly to be seen. So he has blood on the planks near his house. The other guy that was charged with the murder and confessed to parts of it, looks like, saw LaCour go up to this man's house. The Reverend come out there. LaCour gets killed. They take his body. They dump it in the bayou. They dump it in the river. Now, this is why he was missing for a while before they found his body. Now, look, check this out. The two Negroes are closely confined in the iron cells of our jail, which is duly guarded. The Negro preacher, it appears, was also a conjurer or hoodoo doctor, as two of their conjure balls were found in his pocket when arrested. So when the preacher got arrested, he had the tools of the conjurer or the hoodoo doctor in his pocket, on his person. Now, what is this Christian preacher doing with these so-called demonic hoodoo balls? What is he doing with these tools of the practitioner of hoodoo? I'll tell you, because he was practicing hoodoo. He was practicing hoodoo, the Reverend. That's why he had the tools of the trade in his pocket. Now, we don't know why this actually happened, why this young man was killed, why did he go to the Reverend's house, but I'm of the opinion, based on what I know about hoodoo and what I've read about several different stories, I wouldn't be surprised if the Reverend had attempted to conjure LaCour, right? He attempted to conjure him. LaCour went and confronted him about the conjure, and he got killed and dumped in the bayou. Because you see that happen a lot. You see that happen a lot. Now sometimes the conjurer, the person who put the conjure on the individual, I've seen the hoodoo doctor and the conjurer, I've seen them killed by the individuals that they tried to conjure. Sometimes it was a dangerous game. But again, we have another Christian preacher practicing hoodoo. Another Christian preacher practicing hoodoo. Okay? Now, I'm going to show you guys something. Now, not only, just to get out some more information, not only was graveyard dirt used in hoodoo, but also graveyard bones. Okay? Also graveyard bones. Now, the only way to really understand about hoodoo is to go directly to the source. Now, look, when I'm talking about some of the curious ingredients of hoodoo, look, the instrument used with a bag, bottle, or box contains a supply of curious ingredients, such as a pinch of red dirt taken from the grave of some ancestor who was a noted conjure doctor in his or her day. Remember, our ancestors connected with their ancestors as a spiritual practice, because that is what connected them to the spirit realm, and that is how they drew their power. And so they would often use the graveyard dirt. Sometimes any graveyard dirt, as long as you're getting it from the graveyard, is good, and you do it properly. You ask for it, and you leave some kind of gift for the spirit that you're taking the graveyard dirt from, the deceased individual. But if you can find the grave of a legit conjure worker, a legit root worker, or conjure man or conjure woman, if you can find graveyard dirt from their grave, it's like it's more potent, right? It's more potent. So a lot of times they will use that particular graveyard dirt. But not only did they feel like graveyard dirt was powerful, but if you could actually get the bones from a known conjurer, those bones were powerful. Case in point, look at the article. Wanted, conjure bones. Colored ghouls desecrate a grave to get bones for dice. Now they're calling them ghouls. That's really just regular men, but they're saying ghouls because of their behavior. Then it's deplorable behavior. I'm not gonna lie. But look what the article says. Several weeks ago, it was announced, and let me tell y'all something. Again, anybody can tell you about hoodoo, right? I can tell you about hoodoo. Wikipedia can tell you about hoodoo. But what I want you to understand about this channel, I like to show you what the ancestors said about it, how they actually practiced it. Now, mind you, everybody who said they were a conjurer was not telling the truth. Okay, some of it was they were fake, right? Some of them were fake. Some of this, you either had to be born with that ability, you had to be born with that connection to the spiritual realm, or you had to be legit taught it by someone who was legit. You understand what I'm saying? You don't just wake up one day and, oh, I can conjure people. It don't work like that. And everything that I think will work with a conjure may not work. It's rules to it. There's no hoodoo Bible, but there are rules and regulations to the practice. Okay? So sometimes you'll hear off the wall stuff, but every story that you hear and every story that I give you is to give you insight into the actual workings of hoodoo and conjure, and it shows you how our ancestors saw it. And I'm showing you that hoodoo has been there from the very beginning of our enslavement up until modern times. Right now in modern times, a lot of us, we have what's called superstitions. We have beliefs. We have practices. We do things. We say things. We interpret things a certain way because of hoodoo. We just don't know that it comes from hoodoo because we weren't taught that. But I digress. Look at the article. Several weeks ago, it was announced that the grave in which Sarah Barlow, an old negress, was buried 2 years ago at Post Oak Church, Mississippi, had been desecrated. Recent developments have led to the arrest of 3 young colored men for the crime. It turns out that these ghouls were not after money or hidden treasure, but that they were longing after conjure bones, and bones out of which to manufacture dice, which are currently reported among a certain class of ignorant Negro crap shooters as invincible. Now, our ancestors aren't ignorant. I hate when they use these terms, but they just so damn racist. But anyway, now before I go on, in hoodoo, remember, I told you, hoodoo utilizes nature. It's a religion for the living. It's a religion for the living. And there is a spiritual and a divine essence in everything that exists, even the rocks, even the dirt, even the fly, the mosquito, the snake, the tree, the damn flower. Everything has an essence of the divine in it. Nothing could exist in the spirit, in the physical realm, without a connection to the spiritual realm. It's like a duality. The human is the flesh and the spirit. The animal, the flesh and the spirit. The rock, not the flesh, but the physical matter and the spiritual matter that makes it up. Right? Everything is duality. Everything is connected to the divine. That's how our ancestors saw it. And so animal bones were always used in hoodoo practices. Certain animals held more power to the conjure man and the conjure woman. And so what we're seeing here with these young men seeking out the bones of Sarah Barlow It is because Sarah Barlow was a known conjurer during her lifetime. And so they felt that her bones, right? Her bones would be more potent than just the graveyard dirt, and her bones would be more potent than the bones of an animal. And they were trying to get these bones to make dice out of them so that they could use these magic dice to win crap games. This is what they're trying to do. Look, they say the story goes that when they dug into the grave and found the corpse in such a good state of preservation, notwithstanding it had been buried nearly 2 years, they took fright and ran away. The case has attracted considerable attention on account of its novelty. It is possibly the first one of its kind ever tried in the state. The colored population are manifesting no little interest in the affair, as most of them have a mortal dread of conjure bones or anything pertaining to the black art. Now, this is after slavery. After slavery, they're saying most of the colored population believe in hoodoo and conjure. So I showed you from colonial times, hoodoo was there, conjure was there. On the plantation, hoodoo was there, conjure was there. And after we were free, hoodoo was there and conjure was there. So at what point was the knowledge of the religion that our ancestors created, when was that scrubbed from the record to where all we know now is Abrahamic faith and Abrahamic faith religions? Why is it that whenever you talk to somebody, I was taught this growing up. So I know some of you were, that, man, on the plantation, it was Christianity, man. It was the Bible. Our ancestors were Christian, and that's what carried us through. It was their powerful belief in God and Jesus and the Holy Spirit is what kept them through. I never heard that my ancestors had created their own spiritual system, and it was that spiritual system that carried them through. I always heard that the slave revolts, the slave rebellions, and the uprisings were led by Christians. That's what I was always taught. I never knew that some of the earliest slave revolts, the leaders, were hoodoo workers. I never knew that Denmark Vesey, one of the main people that helped him get the black people on his side, was a hoodoo worker. I never knew that. I never knew that Christians also practiced hoodoo. Direct contradiction in my mind. I never knew that when you talk into history and you say, oh, the pastor of this church, the pastor of that church, the pastor of this church on the plantation, these pastors were practicing hoodoo. I never knew. And I'm going to show you just how they mixed this more and more as this video goes on. They mixed it. It wasn't just Christianity. It was also the religion that our ancestors created. But you want to know something? They hid from us what our ancestors created, because that is what gave us our connection to the spiritual realm. Now, when grandma and grandpa tries to connect with us from the spiritual world to help us in this real life, we think it's a demon. We have been trained to believe that any contact with the spiritual world is like contact with something evil and something wicked. And we wonder why we steady catching hell. We wonder why we steady catching hell. Because some of the help, we are refusing the help from our ancestors in the spiritual realm. We're refusing their help, and we're calling them demons. We're calling them fallen angels. We're calling them demonic spirits. We're calling them evil. All that nonsense. And that's just grandma and grandpa. That's just great grandma and great grandpa. Imagine that. Imagine that. We've been tricked. But we've been tricked. But not no more. Not no more. One of the main things that helped us get through on those slave plantations was hoodoo. Point blank, period. Point blank, period. That's what did it. That's what did it. And I can prove it. I can prove it all day. This is not all of the sources that I have, but I can prove it to you all day. It shouldn't be much of a stretch. But look, check this out. Now I'm going to show you guys something. Now, even white people, I'm going to say that again. Even white people, one more time, even white people used hoodoo and conjuring. It was not a worthless superstition that only the Negroes used. It was white people. Now, this is something our ancestors created on the plantation. And it was so powerful. Now, we never taught like conversion. We never tried to convert anybody to hoodoo. But it was so powerful that when you read the articles and you read the stories, that a lot of our ancestors, they believed in this stuff, right? And it was so powerful that even some white people, they tried to get on the bandwagon. Now let that marinate. Look, check out this story. Hoodoo didn't work, and Sally got that's worser. They're just writing how our ancestors spoke in broken English. But let's look at some of these white converts that's trying to do what we do. Hey, look at some of these white converts, man, trying to practice hoodoo. What did they see? Look, they're from Birmingham, Alabama, deep south. I actually got some ancestors that were enslaved in Alabama. But this is post-slavery, right? I told you, even after slavery, hoodoo was alive and well. Why don't you know about it? Because that's your spiritual tradition that your ancestors created. And even if you don't want to practice it, you should know that your ancestors created a religion. It's not many cultures, civilizations, groups of people on the face of the planet Earth that can say they created a spiritual tradition. You understand what I'm telling you? That's why this knowledge is so powerful. This only happens every once in a while. You can go 1,000 years before somebody create a new spiritual tradition, a new quote unquote religion. You can go 1,000 years before it happened, right? Our ancestors did it, and they did it on the slave plantation, and they did it to such a degree where you even had white folk. By the end of it, you had white folk trying to be a part of it. Look, Birmingham, Alabama. A white woman named Miss Titmore was arraigned before Judge Benners of the Court of Common Pleas the other day on a charge of larceny, of the larceny of a cow belonging to an aged Negro woman named Adelaide Williams. So this white woman, basically, she caught some charges. Let's see how this play out. The evidence was not sufficient to sustain the charge, but it revealed a state of facts that showed the credulence of the Negro race and the efficacy of the hoodoo. Here we got hoodoo. Like I say, hoodoo was alive and well from the colonial periods, even after our enslavement. Hundreds of years it carried us through. The Negro woman, and even when you hear talk about Christianity and pastors, I'm telling you, underneath the surface, hoodoo is still there. The Negro woman stated that she was the proud mother of a yellow girl of about 17 years old, and that instead of staying at home, she said offspring, as the old woman expressed it, went a gallivanting with the boys. This behavior on the part of her daughter, Sally, caused the old woman some uneasiness, and she called on the white woman for assistance. So you have the old Negro woman with a 17-year-old daughter who she keep leaving the house, sneaking out of the house. She running around with the boys. Tale as old as time, okay? Tale as old as time. Now, the mother, she don't like the fact that her 17-year-old daughter keep leaving the house, running around with these boys. So she go to some white woman for assistance, the white hoodoo practitioner. Check this out. The said assistance was immediately promised, and a bargain was made that in the event the white woman succeeded in casting a spell on the wayward Sally, she was to receive the cow in payment. So she went to the white woman, who was the hoodoo worker, told her what was going on, and the white woman said, okay, I'm going to cast a spell to keep your daughter from running around with these boys, and in return, you're going to give me a cow. They make the deal, shake hands, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. Now, according to the testimony of Adelaide, the white woman fixed the powder. This is how you know it's hoodoo, right? And I'm going to show you, this is definitely hoodoo. The white woman fixed the powder in a bottle of liquid, which she gave to the girl with the injunction to place them in her trunk, and the desire to roam would immediately vanish. Remember, whenever you will make the conjure, okay, and a conjure could be in a bag, a bottle, or a box. All of those are variations of the Minkisi bag. Now, whenever you did the conjure, you would put the items in the conjure, right? And then you would put the conjure bag, the Minkisi, you would put it in close proximity to the person that you want to conjure. This is what we're seeing. The white woman made a conjure bottle of Minkisi, and she said that it needed to be placed in the trunk of the girl, and the desire to run around with the boys would immediately vanish. The directions were carried out, and the white woman took possession of the cow. Did the charm have the desired effect? Asked the prosecuting attorney of the old auntie. What you mean? Did the hoodoo keep Sally from running around at night? Keep that child from running around at night? Lordy man, no sir. It made her worser. Did you tell the defendant she could have the cow if the hoodoo worked all right? Let me tell you, I'll tell the truth about that conjure. I did tell that white lady that I would give her the cow, but the onlyest way she was to get it was for that girl of mine to be cured from a sexual promiscuity. Sally was put on the stand to testify as to the effects of the charm, and also stated very emphatically that it made her worser. And since that medicine was in her trunk, she had almost left home. So the 17-year-old girl, they put her on the stand. They was like, hey, since they did the hoodoo on you, did it work? And she said, no, actually it made me worse. I started running around with guys even more. I don't want to make fun of her, but she wanted to be, I guess, more sexually active. And she said since that medicine was put in her trunk, she almost just ran away completely. It just never came back. It didn't fix the situation. So the Judge Benners, discharged the woman on a charge of larceny and ordered the cow to be returned to the old auntie. So they didn't put the white woman in jail. They didn't really charge her like with larceny of the cow, but they told her, look, y'all made a verbal agreement that if Sally got better, you should get the cow. Sally didn't get better, so you got to return the cow back to the woman. So she had to return the cow. But here we have an instance of even white people trying to get in on hoodoo, right? Even white people trying to get in on hoodoo. Now, check this out. Check this out. I told you guys I got a lot for y'all today, man. I'm gonna show y'all so much because y'all need to just get the information so you can process the information. And I want you to see how important hoodoo was to your ancestors. And it's a religion that they created. But look, I'm now going to tell y'all a story. This is the Negro man on death row who tried using hoodoo and a rabbit's foot to get clemency. He tried to use hoodoo and a rabbit's foot to get clemency. Now check this out. The man that you're looking at on the screen, that's a Negro man, Charles B. Wisdom. Now, in 1894, He was officially put on trial for murder, and he was subsequently sentenced to death. Now, what I have on the screen, this is actually some of the documented trial transcripts. You can see that it's the state versus wisdom. That's wisdom. From the Supreme Court of Missouri, Division Number 2. The date is January 31st, 1894. So again, this is after slavery. This is around 30 years after the end of the Civil War. Hoodoo is alive and well. Hoodoo is so much so alive and well that you're going to see this gentleman try to use it to get clemency from a governor to save him from death row. And he even tries to use a rabbit's foot. I'm going to ask y'all a question. How many of you guys have ever heard that a rabbit's foot was lucky? I'm going to let that hang in the air for a second. How many of you have ever heard that a rabbit's foot is lucky? I know I have. I even had a rabbit's foot before. To be honest with you, I remember having a rabbit's foot when I was younger. I had a rabbit's foot, and I had it for good luck. And my daddy a preacher. I was raised Christian, right? But I had a rabbit's foot in my lifetime. Now I want y'all to think about something. What am I doing with a rabbit's foot anyway? There's nothing Christian about that. And there's so many people I know that heard that rabbit's foot was lucky. Now I'm going to show you guys now. The first thing I'm going to say is that the supernatural qualities of a rabbit's foot go back thousands of years. Let's get that out the way first. But as far as our understanding of the rabbit's foot here in North America, did you know that the rabbit's foot is intimately connected to hoodoo? And 9 times out of 10, if you yourself has ever had a rabbit's foot, wanted a rabbit's foot, or believed that a rabbit's foot was lucky, it was because of hoodoo. Now, you may not have knew it was because of hoodoo, but I'm going to show you that it was because of hoodoo. Now, look, check this out. I highlighted number 1 in this list where it says on trial for murder. Admissions of defendant before the coroner are admissible for but not conclusive on the state. So he was charged with first-degree murder, this guy right here. Now look at why I highlighted number 5. This is important. It says evidence that the defendant refused to touch the body of the murdered man at the morgue at request of a person who was prompted by an old superstition was immaterial, but its admission was not prejudicial to defendant. So when this guy was arrested, right? When this guy was arrested, to try to determine if he was guilty or not, one of the things that they did, they took him to the morgue and told him to touch the dead body of the deceased. And they're saying that he refused to touch the body. Now, while that wasn't totally admissible in court, they used that to allude to the fact that he was guilty, and he knew he was guilty. That's why he didn't want to touch the body. Now, there was an old superstition. Now, this superstition ain't hoodoo. This comes from the Middle Ages, the European continent. Well, yeah, the European, one of the European nations. But they had a superstition that if the person who committed the murder touched the body of the deceased, then the body would start bleeding. And why I'm pointing that out is to show you that during this time period, 1894, the Europeans were talking very badly about hoodoo and conjure and our spiritual practices, calling it superstitious and nonsense. While they held superstitions of their own. That's what I want you guys to understand. They're going to tell you that hoodoo is superstitious. Conjure doesn't work. Conjure man and the conjure woman is nothing. But then they're going to tell you that you should go to the pastor or the preacher. You should have them lay hands on you. But to go to the conjure man is irrelevant. But just think about the mentality. They're going to say, oh, you hoodoo workers are so superstitious. But their superstitions are valid. Come on, man. Get out of here. But this is the Negro man on death row who tried using hoodoo and a rabbit's foot to get lucky. And I'm going to show you guys the connection between rabbit's feet and hoodoo. Something you probably never heard before. Look, why do we believe a rabbit's foot is lucky? Have you ever asked yourself that? Like, I never did when I was younger. I just heard rabbit's foot, 4-leaf clover, yada, yada, yada. Hey, bring you good luck. And like I say, I had a rabbit's foot. Several of my friends had rabbit's foot. But why do we believe that a rabbit's foot is lucky? Now, yes, this goes back thousands of years, multiple cultures, but why do we believe it in North America? This is going to blow your mind. Now, this is just coming from Wikipedia. That's where we're going to start, but we're going to dig a little deeper. But look, in some cultures, a rabbit's foot is carried as an amulet believed to bring good luck. This belief is held by people in a great number of places around the world, including Europe, China, Africa, Australia, and North and South America. In variations of this superstition, remember this is going to be important later. In variations of this superstition, the rabbit it came from must possess certain attributes, such as having been killed in a particular place using a particular method or by a person possessing particular attributes, e.g. a cross-eyed man. Remember that. Now look, in North American culture, we're in North America. Well, I don't know where y'all at, but if you're from the United States of America, like me, you're in North America. Okay? Now, mind blown time. The belief in North American folklore may originate in the system of folk magic known as hoodoo. Boom! Shaka laka laka laka. Now check that out. Who knew that the possible origin in North American folklore of a rabbit's foot may actually originate in hoodoo? Is this something else that our ancestors gave to the individuals on these shores? Is this a part of our spiritual tradition that spread out and people picked up aspects of something that our ancestors created on the plantation? Look, a number of strictures attached to the charm are now observed mostly in the breach. Namely, now this is all important. Namely, that it must be the left hind foot of a rabbit which was shot or otherwise captured in a cemetery. Why does the rabbit have to be captured in a cemetery? Remember, I told you the cemetery is important to hoodoo because of the connection to the spiritual realm. In hoodoo, we connect to the spirit realm by way of our ancestors. And the cemetery is a good place to harness that spiritual energy. Some sources tell that the rabbit must be taken by the full moon, and others specify the new moon. Some say instead that the rabbit must be taken on a Friday or a rainy Friday or Friday the 13th. Some sources say that the rabbit should be shot with a silver bullet, while others say that the foot must be cut off while the rabbit is still alive. So there are various rituals involved in the acquiring of the rabbit's foot that will assist the rabbit's foot in having the supernatural power that you're looking for from having it. Okay? Now, various rituals suggested by the sources, though they differ widely from one another, share a common element of the uncanny and the reverse of what is considered good omen and auspicious. A rabbit is an animal into which shape-shifting witches, such as Isabel Gaudy, claim to be able to transform themselves, right? These widely varying circumstances may share a common thread of suggestion that the true lucky rabbit's foot is actually cut from a shape-shifted witch. The suggestion that the rabbit's foot, listen to me good, the suggestion that the rabbit's foot is a substitute for a part from a witch's body is corroborated by other folklore from Hoodoo. Willie Dixon's song, Hoochie Coochie Man, mentions a black cat bone, along with his mojo and his John the Conqueror. All are artifacts in hoodoo magic. Given the traditional association between black cats and witchcraft, a black cat bone is also potentially a substitute for a human bone from a witch. Look, hoodoo lore. Now, I didn't write this wiki page. I didn't put hoodoo all in this. Hoodoo lore also uses graveyard dust saw from a cemetery for various magical purposes. Dust from a good person's grave keeps away evil. Dust from a sinner's grave is used for more nefarious magic. The use of graveyard dust may also be a symbolic appropriation of the physical parts of a corpse as a relic and a form of sympathetic magic. So look, before I go further, look, there's no doubt that here in North America, this rabbit's foot is intimately tied to hoodoo. No doubt from what we're reading. Now, individuals can argue, oh, hoodoo got it from here, got it from hoodoo. I'm not worried about all of that. But we see that the concept of a rabbit's foot being lucky is intimately tied to hoodoo. Let's give hoodoo his credit. Hoodoo, the religion and spiritual system created by our ancestors. I had a lucky rabbit's foot. I never knew that this science came from my ancestors, and I'm glad I know it now. But you see how it says that, listen, the suggestion that rabbit's foot is a substitute for a part from a witch's body is corroborated by other folklore from hoodoo. So the rabbit's foot symbolizes a part of a witch's body. Remember, I told you guys that you could get animal bones and use them in your hoodoo and your conjure practices. But now they're talking about the rabbit's foot. The ultimate origin of a rabbit's foot is the fact that a witch, someone who can perform magic, can transform into a rabbit, and to get the rabbit's foot is to get a part of the witch's body. And if you get a part of the corpse, the physical part of a witch's or a conjure person's body, you have more access to the magic associated with that person. Let's go back. Remember this story I just showed you guys? Wanted, conjure bones, right? These young men, they dug up the conjure woman, Sarah Barlow, because they wanted her bones. The bones of a witch, the bones of a conjure woman, the bones of somebody who had this power, has power itself. So this is why they wanted the bones of Sarah Barlow, because bones are intimately connected to the practices of hoodoo. And what was interesting about this story, I meant to highlight it when I went over it. I'm glad I came back, But when they dug up her body after 2 years of being buried, it was still in such a good state of preservation that they got scared and they ran away. What back in, and this is back shortly after slavery, back in those days, what was preserving that woman's body so well? Again, I'm not saying her hoodoo was real. I can't make that claim for you. I'm just trying to give you a few facts. The facts of the matter is, here we have a hoodoo woman who was a known hoodoo woman who was buried for 2 years. And when she was dug up, her body was in still a good state of preservation. So much so that the grave robbers ran away. Okay? So the rabbit's foot can be a substitute, so you won't have to dig up the body of a conjured person. You can get the rabbit's foot as a substitute. So the story we're about to look at, the Negro man on death row who tried using hoodoo and a rabbit's foot to get clemency, I hope it's starting to make a little sense. Why would he even try to use a rabbit's foot? What did he use the rabbit's foot for? How was the rabbit's foot and hoodoo tied together? Well, here in North America, I don't know about nowhere else, but here in North America, you can't separate the rabbit's foot and the hoodoo. Now, remember the specifics that this wiki article told you about, because it's going to make sense later, and I'm going to come back to it. Look, this is how the article begins. The Rabbit's Foot Hoodoo, a novel appeal for executive clemency, information for the superstitious. Charles B. Wisdom, a Negro under sentence of death in the Missouri Penitentiary, recently adopted a novel method of appealing for executive clemency. He sent a letter to Governor Stone enclosing a rabbit's foot to which was attached a bag of hoodoo medicine. Directions as to how to use the hoodoo are given in the letter, which reads as follows. So that guy that I showed you, the Negro, Charles B. Wisdom, arrested for murder, sentenced to death. In order to get clemency from the governor, you know how a governor can pardon you on death row. We all know about that. The governor can pardon death row inmates. So this death row inmate, he petitioned the governor to pardon him, but he did it in a very unique way. And I'm glad he did it in this unique way, because it's going to give us more insight into what hoodoo looked like on the ground. And so he wrote to Governor Stone. Now, just for the sake of historical relevance, this is William Joel Stone. This was the governor that he wrote to. Okay? Now look, William Joel Stone was born May 7th, 1848. He was born during the time of slavery, and he died 1918. Now, he was a Democratic politician from Missouri. Now, the Democrats were white supremacists. I know what Democrats are today, but back then, the Democrats were white supremacists. The Democrats were the KKK. It was the Republican Party that was trying to do things positive for the black man, the Negro. So this guy, William Joel Stone, he was a Democratic politician from Missouri who represented his state in the United States House of Representatives, blah, 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 blah. He also served as the 28th governor of Missouri from 1893 to 1897. This would put him there in 1894 when Charles B. Wisdom was trying to get clemency. Look, 1894. So this is the governor, okay? Background, just to fill in the blanks of the story. I like to teach history, and I like to study history. So this is the man that he tried to get clemency from. Now, he didn't get clemency, right? we're going to see that this guy was never going to give him clemency because the Democrats were white supremacists. And the Democrats, during the time So let's read the story. Now, in this story, we're going to clearly see Christian language and biblical verbiage being used in conjunction with hoodoo. And you're going to further see what I'm trying to point out, that your ancestors' Christianity is not your Christianity, right? I'm going to give it to you guys. Now, some of this is kind of hard to read because I actually went and got the newspaper articles, but bear with me. So look. This is what the letter wisdom. This is wild though, man. It's wild, man. A rabbit's foot, and he attached a hoodoo bag to it. And he wrote in there directions on how to use the hoodoo so he could get off death row. That's wild, man. But hey, I mean, if you're on death row, what do you got to lose? Look what that's said. Dear Governor, I would like for you to do me a favor, and it will be keep this whole matter secret and not telling you guys about this story means what? Newspaper means that he didn't even attempt to keep it secret. He exposed the whole matter immediately, right? The first thing, that's how you know he ain't got no damn clemency. He didn't even follow this one rule of keeping this stuff secret. So look, he's saying, I enclose in the letter a rabbit foot in this letter. Now we know rabbit's foot are connected to hoodoo. I want you to take it and blow on it 3 on your face, and you will have good luck the rest of your days. Not interfere with the little bag bag. Remember, they would make the Minkisi or the Conjure bag. Now that would be in close proximity to the individual that you wanted to conjure. So he wanted to put good conjure on this governor. He's basically saying, look, I will trade you good luck for leniency, for a pardon. This is what he's saying. Look, he say, now I want, but it's real crazy too. He told him, don't let nothing waste out, or you won't live for 24 hours. And that's like not a direct threat. It's just like a warning, but still the governor would have to think, why would you send me something that if I do it wrong, it could possibly kill me in 24 hours? It would seem disrespectful. Hey, my boy, wow, man. But I'm glad this happened because we can read the story. But anyway, let's look into it. Now, I want you to do like I tell you. I know my business because I was born in Possum Bottom near Clarksville, Tennessee, and not far from Bear Creek. I want you to take a hatchet and go over to the Supreme Courtyard and dig a little hole and put the rabbit foot in it and sprinkle a little salt over the foot. And while sprinkling it, you must say, Silas and Peter, Silas and Paul, the good Lord, he made us all. From ashes to ashes, from dust to dust, in the Lord will I put my trust. Now pause right there. Remember in the very beginning, what I tell you hoodoo was. It's a mixture of African spirituality modified for the environment over here, mixed with Abrahamic faith, mainly Christianity, because that's the main one that they had contact with. Now, Silas and Peter, Silas and Paul, who are they? Their names from the Bible. Paul, wrote like 14 books in the New Testament. Peter, disciple of Jesus, on this rock I will put I will build my church. Ashes to ashes, from dust to dust. It's an allusion to the biblical verses that say that we will return to, we're going to return to the dust from which we are made. And he says, in the Lord I will put my trust. So the spell that he's reciting, the incantation that he's telling the governor to recite, in conjunction with the rabbit foot and the hoodoo, he's invoking characters from the Bible, and he's invoking Jesus. Jesus is the Lord, that in the Lord I will put my trust. So he's mixing Silas, Peter, Paul, verses from the Bible and the Lord, but at the same time, he's saying you say this stuff as an incantation spell after you take this rabbit foot with the hoodoo bag attached to it. You blow on it 3 times, you rub it on your face, you take a hatchet, you dig in the dirt, and you bury it, and you sprinkle salt over it. So you do a hoodoo ritual, and then you recite an incantation where you mention characters from the Bible. Now, if all I told you was Silas and Peter, Silas and Paul, the good Lord, he made us all from ashes to ashes, from dust to dust. In the Lord, I will put my trust. Your mind is automatically going to go to the Bible. You're automatically going to go to Christianity. Now, that's not an incantation used in Christianity, but the names is going to trigger in your mind. You're going to know I'm talking about the Bible. A light bulb is going to go off. But you see how that is mixed with the hoodoo. Every ancestor that said they were Christian, these are the Christians. These are the Christians talking about in the Lord I put my trust, but he got a rabbit's foot and a hoodoo bag that's supposed to do something. Come on, man. Come on. Y'all got to understand what I'm saying. You got to understand what hoodoo is. Because of what hoodoo is, it was our ancestors' spirituality masked under Christianity, expressed with biblical vernacular and biblical verbiage. You're seeing it right here. Let's go further. He goes on to say, after you say that incantation about Silas, Peter, Paul, and the Lord, he says, and then you must cover the foot up with dirt and press it down. And after you have done so, you're going to have to say something else. You will have to say this short prayer in my behalf, on the behalf of Charles B. Wisdom. Oh, merciful Lord. He's invoking Jesus again over the rabbit's foot. Now, y'all know good and doggone well, Jesus ain't got nothing to do with no rabbit's foot. Let's just be real. But this guy is invoking Jesus over the rabbit's foot. Your ancestors' Christianity is not the Christianity that you think it is. We've all been lied to, even me. Look, he says you're supposed to say this prayer. Oh, merciful Lord, give the sweetness of thy comfort to thy afflicted servant. And according to thy accustomed mercy, remove the heavy burden of his afflictions. Give him, I humbly beseech thee, patience in suffering, resignation to thine adorable will, and perseverance in thy suffering. Then everything will be all right, and I will make everything all right with you. And you must let the rabbit foot remain buried 3 days, and then dig it up and send it back to me. You must be sure and do so, for if you don't, I will never have any more good luck, or you either. Now, why do you think he wanted to leave it buried for 3 days and then dig it up? Why is he burying a rabbit's foot, invoking Jesus, Peter, and Paul, leaving it in the ground for 3 days, and then digging it up? could that have any allusion to Jesus dying on the cross and being in the grave 3 days and 3 nights, as they say? Right? Is the 3 days that the rabbit's foot should be left buried, is that connected to Jesus being in the grave 3 days and 3 nights? Talk to me. Is this spirituality and Christianity mixed? You bet your bottom dollar it is. That's hoodoo. This is what hoodoo is. But if you hear that prayer, if you hear me say, "Oh, merciful Lord, give thy sweetness of thy comfort to thy afflicted servant, and according to thy accustomed mercy, remove the heavy burden of his affliction. Give him, I humbly beseech thee, patience in his suffering, resignation to thy adorable will, and perseverance in thy service." I can go to any church, stand up before the crowd, and say that prayer, and nobody, and I mean nobody, except the people who watch this video, would know that I'm reciting a hoodoo incantation. I'm performing a hoodoo spell right there. You wouldn't know the difference. So sometimes when you see and hear what you think to be Orthodox Christianity, is not, family. Okay, let's go on. The letter concludes with the statement that if the worst comes to worst, the writer will go to heaven. Basically, the worst come to worst, he still gets sentenced to death. The writer, Charles B. Wisdom, will go to heaven, and there on Judgment Day, he will meet the St. Louis police officers who were instrumental in his arrest and conviction. So he actually puts this in a letter too. If he gets killed, when he gets to heaven on Judgment Day, what do we find Judgment Day is in the Bible? Ladies and gentlemen, Book of Revelation, the great day of judgment. This hoodoo guy is talking about Judgment Day. He says he will meet the St. Louis police officers who were instrumental in his arrest and conviction. Referring to this event, he makes this awful threat against the police. So this is what he's going to do to them on Judgment Day. "I will say to the police, depart from me. I know you not." Come on, anybody that know the Bible, y'all know in the Bible there's a verse or verses where they say that when Judgment Day happens and everybody's being judged, there are going to be people who are going to stand before Jesus, and they are going to say, "Jesus, did we not cast out demons in your name? Did we not heal the sick in your name? Did we not do this? Did we not do that? Did we not do this in your name?" And Jesus is going to look at them and say, "Depart from me, ye workers of iniquity. I never knew you." That's what he's alluding to, but he's saying he's going to say this to the police because he's basically saying he was wrongfully convicted. He didn't commit the murder. So look, he say, "I will say to the police, depart from me. I know you not. You robbed me in the Drexler case." Drexler is the man that they say was murdered. "Prepare for the devil and his angels." The devil and his angels, again, this comes from the Bible. The hoodoo guys talking about the devil and angels. "And I will cast them into hell and give them the dirty horse laugh." Hell comes from the Bible. The dirty horse laugh does not. Now look, check this out. The rabbit's foot superstition has a firm hold on the Negro race, and a surprisingly large number of white persons manifest a certain measure of faith in it. So even white folk were picking up this rabbit's foot thing. Look, Mr. E.C. Norse, a civil engineer of Chicago, lost a rabbit's foot the other day, which he valued so highly that he immediately advertised in the newspapers and spent considerable money to recover the treasure. Now watch this. This is why I highlighted it. Look what they say about the rabbit's foot. "Before it came into his possession, Mr. Norse rabbit's foot belonged to a cottontail rabbit, which was shot in a graveyard by a cross-eyed Negro in the dark of the moon and by means of the left barrel of the gun. Hold up, wait a minute. In the newspaper, this guy is saying this white guy lost a rabbit's foot and he paid money to get it back. And it was special because the rabbit that it came from was a cottontail and it was shot in a graveyard by a cross-eyed Negro. So we got this rabbit's foot from a Negro, a hoodoo practitioner, white folk using our sciences. And look, shot in a graveyard by a cross-eyed Negro. Remember when I told you guys to remember what Wiki was saying? Look at the highlighted part. In variations of this superstition, the rabbit it came from, the rabbit's foot, must possess certain attributes, such as having been killed in a particular place using a particular method or by a person possessing particular attributes, e.g., by a cross-eyed man. They specifically mention a cross-eyed man. So a certain place, a certain method, and a certain type of person, a cross-eyed man. But how did he get his rabbit's foot? It was shot in a graveyard, a particular place, by a cross-eyed Negro, the cross-eyed Negro, using a particular method. By means of the left barrel of the gun. So you got the particular place, you got the particular method, and you got the particular person possessing particular attributes, a cross-eyed man. He goes on to say, Bunny, when shot, was just in the act of jumping over the grave of a murderer, and so his left hind foot is possessed of extremely potent hoodoo properties. So the bunny was shot when it was jumping over the grave of a murderer, and they actually took his left hind foot. Is that important? Look at the highlighted part, namely that it must be the left hind foot of a rabbit which was shot or otherwise captured in a cemetery. This is exactly the rabbit's foot the man got in this particular story. Look, some souls tell that the rabbit must be taken by the full moon. This guy, rabbit's foot, was shot in the graveyard by a cross-eyed Negro in the dark of the moon. Now, we can glean what this white man was using his rabbit's foot for, because look, it was shot while it was jumping over the grave of a murderer. So it possessed extremely potent hoodoo. Now, why would he get it jumping over the grave of a murderer? Look, dust from a good person's grave keeps away evil. But this was a murderer. This wasn't a good person. Check it out. Dust from a sinner's grave is used for more nefarious magic. The use of graveyard dust may also be a symbolic appropriation of the parts of a corpse as a relic. So, this rabbit's foot killed in the graveyard while jumping over the grave of a murderer or a sinner gave it extremely potent hoodoo power that could be used for nefarious magic. He was basically trying to use hoodoo to fuck somebody up. Excuse my language. F somebody up. Not ward off evil. He was trying to bring evil on someone. That's why when he lost it, he was putting advertisements in the newspaper and he was spending money, offering a reward, trying to get it back. He needed it back so that he could see through with his endeavors to harm whoever he was trying to harm. but he was obviously using it for nefarious magic. Right? Hoodoo, white folk using hoodoo. Now look, here is a recipe for lifting a hoodoo laid by a rabbit's foot. Now they're including this because yes, the rabbit's foot can be used for good luck and good hoodoo, but I just showed you the fact that this man got the rabbit's foot while he was jumping over a murderer's grave, gave it basically like evil power. He wanted to use it to bring a curse on somebody. Now, in order to break the hoodoo, you have to use hoodoo. Hoodoo has to go against hoodoo, right? Now, I'm going to show you a further mixing of hoodoo and biblical information. So you're going to come away from this understanding exactly what I'm telling you, that it was hoodoo that carried us through them plantations. It was hoodoo that carried us after. And some of the stuff that you guys do right now today is hoodoo. You just don't know what hoodoo is. So here is a recipe for lifting a hoodoo laid by a rabbit's foot. First, you catch a yellow dog, measure 3 inches back from the tip of its tail, and carefully extract 3 hairs. Then the man must cut off a piece of the branch of a crab apple tree. This piece must be 3 inches in length, and it must, when secured, be split in half. You see that 3 keep coming up. Numerology, numbers has significance in hoodoo. You got to understand the numbers. This piece must be 3 inches in length, and it must, when secured, be split in half. Then one end must be tied with a piece of red twine 3 inches in length. There go 3 again. Now watch this. Then, while the man repeats the 10 commandments in their proper order, he must insert the 3 hairs from the dog hair way down the split stick. Wait a minute. Whoa, the 10 commandments. So you mean to tell me you get a dog, you measure 3 inches from the back, from the tip of his tail, you extract 3 hairs, then you cut off a piece of a branch from a crabapple tree. This piece must be 3 inches in length. Then you got to split that in half. And then you must tie the ends, one end of it, with a piece of red twine that's 3 inches in length. And then while you're doing that, you got to repeat the 10 commandments. What the 10 commandments got to do with the spell? What does the 10 commandments got to do with the spell? If I hear somebody talking about the 10 commandments, they got to believe in the Bible, right? They can't believe in magic, right? They can't believe in spells and wizards and witchcraft, right? You're wrong. You're wrong. Let's go further. Then, with another piece of red twine, 3 inches in length, you got to understand the numerology. I don't have time to break it down here, maybe for another video. But the other end of the split stick must be securely fastened. The man must then insert the stick with its twine and hair attachment in the space above the 3rd button on his vest, counting from the top, and listen, and walk to his home going backward. And when he reaches his home, he must walk upstairs backward 3 times. Now, what's that walking backward? Because he's trying to undo a hoodoo. So he's walking backwards because he's trying to break a hoodoo curse. I can drop that jewel on you. But look, he must walk upstairs backward 3 times. There go that 3 again. Each time, what does he do when he's walking up the stairs backwards 3 times? Saying the 10 commandments backward. So now he says the 10 commandments again, but he says the 10 commandments backwards. Why is all this biblical lingo involved in these spells? Because hoodoo is African spirituality mixed with Christianity, right? It's our ancestor spirituality hidden under the guise of Christianity. You hear somebody calling out the 10 Commandments, you won't think nothing of it. But they could be saying the 10 Commandments in a hoodoo spell. These are some of the incantations. They sound biblical. It sounds some of the prayers. Some of your biblical prayers are hoodoo incantations, and you just don't know it. Some of the songs, some of the old Negro spirituals, some of your hymns. Let's go further. Then he must take a stick with its accoutrements and place it in a position under the third step of the stairs. Remember, the Munkisi, the Conjure or whatever, has to be placed in a certain spot in close proximity under the house, in a room, in a trunk, somewhere where the person who's trying to be hoodooed or you're trying to break the hoodoo, somewhere where they frequent. Here, the outfit must remain 3 weeks. Here goes 3 again. When it must be taken out and burned with a ceremony consisting of this. So you leave it for 3 weeks, you take it out, and then you burn it in a ritualistic way. What's the ritual? The man must dig a pit. Then he must stand 3 paces in front of it. 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. Taking the stick, and look, I just want to throw something out there. In Christianity, you got the Trinity. What's the Trinity? You got the Father, you got the Son, and you got the Holy Spirit. You got Jesus in the grave 3 days and 3 nights. You got Jonah in the belly of the whale 3 days and 3 nights. Right? Now there's several numbers that hold meaning in the Bible. 3 is definitely one of them. But I want you to pay attention. 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. 3 is not only powerful in the Bible, 3 is also powerful in other spiritual traditions. You have trinities not only in the Bible, but you also have the concept of trinities, the 3, in other spiritual traditions, like ancient Kemet. You got several trinities. You got Osar, Aset, and Heru, or who you may know as Osiris, Isis, and Horus, the mother, the father, the child, the divine 3. The father, the mother, the child, the divine 3 that makes up the family unit. Right? The Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. The 3 that make up the Godhead in Christianity. It's a reason why you see 3 all through this thing. They're trying to invoke some spiritual power with numbers. But anyway, so the man must dig a pit. Then he must stand 3 paces in front of it, taking the stick between the third fingers of each hand. You can't miss 3 in this spell. He must wave his hands backward over his head 3 times. And it's backwards because they're undoing a conjure. The third time, he waves the stick over his head backwards. The third time, letting go of the stick, which is supposed to fall into the pit that he dug. Then, with a tablespoon, the pit must be filled in. Then, the poor victim must jump backward over the pit. How many times? 3 times. And now he has lifted the hoodoo. So this is an actual hoodoo spell that some of our ancestors used. Now, a lot of times it'll be generalized as spell, as ritual, incantation, but you won't know the actual words that's used. So I wanted to include all of that so you can get an idea of some of the words that were actually used, and that you can see and hear with your own eyes and ears that in the rituals, in the incantations, in the spells themselves, they invoke biblical characters, right? So just because you hear Peter, Paul, Silas, the Lord, the Ten Commandments, just because you hear Bible verses does not mean you're talking about Orthodox Christianity of today. Hoodoo was hidden under that, and it was mixed with that. That you got to understand that. You have to understand how influential Hoodoo was to our ancestors. Now, there's a lot more that I can show you guys, and a lot more that I do want to show you guys, but I can't keep you here forever, unfortunately. So this has been the power of Hoodoo and Conjure, slave revolts, spells, white converts, and more. One of the things I want you to take away from this video is that only a few people in history has created a spiritual system and a religion. Our ancestors on the slave plantations did just that. They created a religion, they created a spiritual tradition, and they didn't just make it all up. They used aspects of existing spiritualities and spiritual traditions, and they used these in such a way where they could maneuver with it in a situation to where their humanity was trying to be crushed and their souls were trying to be subjected. This spirituality, this religion that we call Hoodoo, existed from the very beginning of our ancestors' enslavement on these shores. And Hoodoo, regardless of what they want to tell you, Hoodoo assisted in the slave revolts, rebellions, and insurrections. Hoodoo assisted the runaways escape to freedom on the Underground Railroad. Hoodoo helped our ancestors get revenge on the overseers and the slave masters. Hoodoo assisted some of our ancestors in preventing them from being beat and whipped and treated unmercifully. Hoodoo healed sicknesses. It healed diseases. It kept us healthy and sane. Some of our ancestors were overtaken with evil spirits, and their minds were infected with what we call now demonic possession, and evil curses and spells were put on them. Hoodoo helped to make them whole. Hoodoo existed for hundreds of years, and it still exists right now today. Hoodoo was so powerful that even the population of whites adopted Hoodoo as their form of spiritual expression. And some of them even took on some of our concepts of amulets and charms, i.e. the lucky rabbit's foot. There are some things and some quote-unquote superstitions that we have today that we have because of the religion and spirituality that our ancestors created on the slave plantations. A lot of people would like to say that it was Christianity that carried us on the slave plantations, but it was not the Christianity that we have today. It was the Hoodoo Christianity. It was Hoodoo. It was Hoodoo. Hoodoo has been there for hundreds of years, and that's what our ancestors used. And we have always had a connection with the ancestral realm because our connection to our ancestors in the ancestral realm gave us access to the spirit realm, right? And once we were convinced that our ancestors were demons, we cut off all contact and connection with the spiritual realm because we saw our ancestors as demons, ghouls, and goblins and ghosts. And so we stopped trying to contact our ancestors and work with our ancestors in the spiritual realm because we were convinced that to do so, we were dealing with demonic spirits. We were convinced that the conjure man and the conjure woman could not do anything to heal us or give us spiritual protection. We were taught that that was superstitious. And then on the flip side, we were taught that we could go to the pastor and he could lay hands on us and pray us and give us some type of spiritual protection. And we were taught that we could pray to get healing, and we could pray to get spiritual strength to help us through a trying time and to help us get over some type of monumental hurt or monumental grief, or bad things were happening to us and we felt like the devil, quote unquote, was riding us. We were taught that we could go to the priest, we could go to the preacher, we could go to the imam, and we could have them say words over us. We could have them lay hands on us. We could have them place the cross on our head. We could have them sprinkle us with holy water. We could have them anoint our heads with holy oil, and that could have some type of spiritual bearing on our life. But oh no, we can't go to the conjure man because that's superstition. What's the difference between a prayer and a spell? What's the difference between holy water, anointed oil, and a conjure bag? What's the difference between a conjure man, conjure woman, and a pastor? What's the difference between a hoodoo doctor and a priest? Your own mental understanding of that individual. That's the difference. The only difference is how you see it with your own mind and how you feel about it in your own heart. An individual will go and sit before a priest and confess all his sins and feel that by confessing all his sins to a priest, then some kind of way that will help them be spiritually cleansed of all the bad that they have done. Is that not magic? But if you say you're going to the root worker, you'll be laughed out of the room. You can go to church, stand in a circle, everybody touch hands and agree and pray. Pray that God remove a sickness. Pray that Jesus remove a sickness from an individual's body. Nobody bats an eye. That's legit. But if you say that you're going to the conjure man or the conjure woman and they whip up a conjure bag and they say that if you do this and you say that and you put this conjure bag in a certain location, you can be healed, that's superstition. Why do we believe this? Why do we believe this? Why would we accept a Catholic that prays to saints? Saint Jerome, saint this, saint that, the saint of travelers, the saint of lost items, the saint of this. They got hundreds of saints that are real people that lived and died. You can live and die and become a saint in the Catholic Church. And we have our people who believe in these saints. That's legit. But then if I say, you know what? When I pray or when I meditate, I want to connect with grandma. They go, oh, whoa, you speaking to the dead? You a necromancer? Oh, that's demonic. If I say I want to talk to grandma, and if I say I want grandma to work for me in the spiritual realm, that's demonic. But then you're gonna turn around and put a statue of Saint Jerome up on your mantle and feel like Saint Jerome is gonna help you. Saint Jerome is a human like grandma was. You don't know Saint Jerome. You don't know these saints, but you know grandma, you know grandpa. Why can't somebody else's ancestors help them from the spiritual realm, but your ancestors can't help you from the spiritual realm. Come on, man. It's like they put a lock on our brain, a lock on our mind. We've been put in spiritual lockdown. We can't see past what they put in front of our faces. And then everything that they demonize, when we do it in our own, using our own cultural expression, is demonic. But then they turn around and do the same thing. But it's so much of a spell on our minds, we don't see it. Them saints, it's ancestor worship. Honestly and truly, Jesus is ancestor worship. Jesus lived and died. Talking about Peter and Paul, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. You talking about Emotep. Talking about Asar, Aset, Heru. Right? Going all the way in the east. You talking about Ramses the Great. Amenemhotep. Right? Talking about, man, Ptah Hotep. Right? Muhammad. The companions of Muhammad. We talking about Bilal, the first black man to call for prayer. What about your ancestors on that, your direct ancestors on that plantation? And one thing about this, see, I watch a lot of YouTube, and I see a lot of debates where they jokingly try to step on us when we try to connect with our ancestral past. And we'll try to talk about ancient Egypt. Oh, you ain't an ancient Egyptian. You don't know about no Egypt. You try to practice Vodou or something like that, or you try to practice something from the Igbo tradition, but then you really get hit with the thought in your mind, well, man, did my ancestors even really come from, are they Igbo? Are they Fulani? Are they a Khan? Are they a mix of all of them? Like, what did my ancestors actually practice? But they brought us over here. They threw us into a mixing pot. They flipped us upside down. They turned us inside and out. They scrambled our brains to where when we try to go back too far, we can't do it with precision because we got mixed and matched so much. And so it's like, do I practice what they practice in the Congo? Do I practice Ifa? Do I do what the Akan people did? Do I do what the Fulani did? Do I look to the ancient Mali Empire? Do I look back to ancient Christianity? Do I look back to ancient Islam? Do I look all the way back to ancient Ethiopia? Do I look all the way back to ancient Egyptian? Do I even know if my direct lineage goes back to that? Well, guess what? We know 100% that our ancestors were the ones that were enslaved on them plantations. And so the ones that was enslaved on that plantation, they created a system. So we can look to that system, see what's in that system, and we know what we can latch on to. And the things that predate that system, that coincide with that system, we know that that's our system. Nobody can take it from us. Nobody can explain it for us. Nobody is the authority on it but us. We the authority. Our ancestors are the authority. It matters a damn what y'all talking about. I can go right to my ancestral records. They try to laugh and joke. Oh, some of our ancestors didn't really have writing, or they say they didn't have writing when the slave trade was going on. So we can't pick up a book and actually read about it. And then even in slavery days, they try to act like we don't have access to what they said, thought, felt, and believed. We got to listen to somebody else talk about it. That's why on this channel, I'm bringing y'all the oral history. I'm showing you what they said. We can go straight to what they said. We can piece this thing together. We can see it for what it is. And we can inherit what was meant for us to be inherited. We can let the ancestors speak and we can do something with it. So I'm going to do something with it. I don't know about you. But thanks for tapping in. The power of Hoodoo and Conjure. Slave revolts, spells, white converse, and more. This your brother Matthew Daniels, a.k.a. Pooh, a.k.a. The Chosen Few, a.k.a. The Real Bookworm. I'm not just a bookworm world. I'm the real bookworm. I'm doing the book game like it ain't never been done before. And I'm doing the book game like it'll probably never be done again. As always, may your name live on forever, and may your memory family never die. Hotep, Ashe, Shalom, peace, I'm out.